The man tried to get closer to Irina, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, leaning against the wall, as if looking for at least the slightest support in this tense moment. He said that he always knew her real name, because the girl was actually Seo-hyun, the one he remembered from before, even if she had changed in appearance. But he could not understand why she had remained silent all this time, had not said a word, as if she was afraid to admit who she really was. At the same time, he noted that the proof of her true essence was right before his eyes, obvious and undeniable for him. The man lightly touched her lips, and suddenly from this touch, a soft blue light began to emanate, as if a hidden power had awakened. At that moment, he experienced a wild, almost primal pleasure, like a long-awaited relief that made his head spin. Then Irina realized that she had accidentally stabilized his condition without even trying. Everything happened on its own, like in the past. After this, the man suddenly pulled her close to him, squeezing her tightly in his arms, as if he was afraid that she would disappear. He kept saying that he had been looking for her everywhere, that he had finally found his dear one, and he repeated this with such despair, as if he lived only for this. And Irina could not understand how he recognized her, because she was sure that the past was forever behind her. In Korea, the country of her past life, there were two special types of gifted people who possessed unusual abilities. The first type are espers, people with incredible power, and the second are conductors, capable of stabilizing the turbulent energy of these espers. But the gift had to be paid for. The espers suffered from the instability of their psyche, which became a real torment for them. They needed guides to guide them on the right path and keep them from going crazy, helping them find balance. An esper that was not stabilized in time could lose its mind at any moment and turn into an uncontrollable monster. The same thing once happened to her husband from a past life, whom she was never able to save from his own power. The man then shouted that it was necessary to immediately evacuate all people before the situation got out of control. But Irina didn't know what to do with Ciel, because he was on the edge and could destroy everything around him in a matter of seconds. She understood that a Class B conductor like herself was incapable of stopping a top-class esper who had lost control. However, as soon as she imagined that he might die, she decided to act without hesitation. Without thinking about the risk, she ran up to him and screamed, begging Ciel to pull himself together, even though she knew he could barely hear her. But he was already completely mad, and there was not a drop of his former sanity left in his gaze. Then she grabbed him and tried to at least hug him, to hold him, to at least bring him back to consciousness for a moment. Irina hugged him so tightly that pain pierced her entire body. But despite the torment, she continued to hold him, as if she was afraid that if she let go, she would lose him forever. It seemed to her as if her whole body was dissolving, disappearing in this pain and warmth, as if she no longer felt her own boundaries. The deeper she sank into darkness and lost consciousness, the more blurred became the images of the past and the memories that had tormented her before. Deep down, she admitted that maybe Ciel never truly loved her, but she was still grateful for him being there in her life. She thought that now she could finally let go of her feelings for him, which had kept her in chains for so long. Finding herself on the very brink between life and death, Irina turned to the Lord with a prayer, full of despair and hope. She asked him that in her next life, she would be allowed to be born into a good family, where there would be love and warmth, which she so lacked. In addition, she dreamed that there would be a man next to her who would love her sincerely, without betrayal and lies. She wanted a simple and calm life, without fear, intrigue, and pain, just the ordinary happiness that many people dream of. After this last thought, she suddenly woke up, feeling that someone was persistently pulling her out of her sleep. Words reached her that it was time to wake up, because soon they would find themselves in the imperial palace, and they needed to look dignified. This girl was Irina de Cloche, who was an extraordinary beauty, and her mother's name was Helena de Cloche. The mother noted with a gentle smile that her daughter was probably very tired after this long journey. The reason was obvious. They had been shaking in the cramped carriage for 3 days without stopping, and this was exhausting even strong people. Along with them rode Baron Arthur de Cloche, Irina's father, a strict but caring man with noble manners, and her brother David, a cheerful and witty young man, remarked with admiration that he did not understand how one could be so beautiful even immediately after waking up. He decided that the reason was probably that today she would become a real lady, and this gave her a special glow. Irina flinched slightly at these words and sharply stopped her brother, reminding him that such things should not be said in public. However, David was sure that there was nothing shameful in this, and even his father agreed, emphasizing that it was true because Irina was his daughter. Irina thought deep down that perhaps her prayer had been heard by God, because she had become part of this loving and harmonious family. But there was one detail that made her life different from the usual. She found herself inside a romantic novel that she had read in her past life in Korea. In this story, the main character, Irene de Cloche, was a traveler between worlds and a native of Earth. Here she demonstrated the amazing gifts of the civilization of Israel that existed in her homeland. Thanks to this, she gained the revered status of a saint, which inspired respect from everyone. Irina managed to win the attention of many of the main characters. Today was the very important day when all the young nobles gathered here for the coming-of-age ceremony were invited to a grand banquet. An atmosphere of anticipation hung in the air. The banquet was held to celebrate the arrival of a saint from the Stern Empire. This event was considered so important that it was prepared in advance to surprise all the guests who arrived in this luxurious hall. In other words, today is the day when all the key characters of the book Irina once read will gather together. It will be the culminating moment when the fates of many will begin to intertwine, as if according to the script from her memories. I wonder if there are any similarities with the plot of the novel? This thought haunted Irina. She tried to grasp the details, but so far everything seemed vague and incomprehensible. She read this novel for one reason, and one reason only. The name of one of the supporting characters and his appearance were exactly the same as her husband from her past life. This amazing coincidence amazed her, but still, this did not mean that he really was her former husband. Irina understood perfectly well that reality was different from the book, but her heart still told her a strange feeling of closeness. But what should we expect from this strange resemblance? Even Irina herself could not understand whether it was worth looking for answers or just leaving everything as it is and enjoying the moment. After that, they went inside the building. The hall turned out to be incredibly beautiful, with high ceilings and luxurious chandeliers, and there were so many people there that the noise was everywhere. Irina's mother noticed that it was as if all the nobility of the empire had gathered there. Every outfit sparkled with jewels, and the guests' faces radiated importance, as if no one wanted to seem less important. The father also noted that it seemed that the titles of those attending the coming-of-age ceremony did not matter much. After all, everyone had come not only for the event, but to see the saint who was the talk of the land. Father assumed that Irina was a little worried, and she only nodded slightly, confirming his words. The excitement was indeed growing, because she was about to see those she knew from the book. Soon the arrival of the star of the Stern Empire, Crown Prince James and Duke Leopold, was announced. The loud words of the herald echoed throughout the hall, causing everyone to freeze. Immediately after this, all those present were ordered to bow their heads in respect for the distinguished guests. The whispers died down, and the hall sank into a tense silence. At last, they saw the Crown Prince. A figure with luxurious blonde hair, which shimmered softly in the light of the chandeliers, appeared before their eyes. That blonde hair and those sky-blue eyes left no doubt about his origins. He looked like he had stepped out of the illustrations from a novel that Irina had once seen. Irina was sure that the Crown Prince himself stood before her. His majestic posture and confident movements confirmed her suspicions, and the man standing behind him was no less important. It was the Duke she had been waiting to see. He was an incredibly handsome man with a cold but attractive gaze. His name was Ciel Leopard, and Irina barely held her breath. When she recognized him, she felt her heart clench painfully with longing, because she missed him so much. The memories came flooding back like a wave, flooding her mind. The reason for this was who she was before. Just a B-class guide in her past life, distant and alien, but she became the exclusive partner of Ciel, an S-class expert. It was a rare event that was known even in scientific circles. Scientists in the past thought that such a thing was impossible. A connection of such a level seemed like a myth, but they proved the opposite by their existence. It was all explained by the astonishing level of similarity between them. No one could have imagined that it would reach such a height. This similarity was a whopping 99.9%. In a system where espers and conduits were ranked from S to D class, this kind of compatibility was something unbelievable. Their case was truly unusual, as it completely disproved the atomic theory, which claimed that identical classes guaranteed a higher percentage of coincidence between the conductor and the esper. That's how Irina became his exclusive guide, and she felt genuine happiness from the fact that she could now be close to Ciel, her beloved, to whom she devoted herself entirely. Irina tried her best to ignore his constant resistance and cold attitude, although inside it was torn apart by pain and anxiety for their future. Time passed, days turned to nights, but their relationship stubbornly remained one-sided, as if a wall stood between them and did not allow them to get truly closer. Ciel left again and again, leaving Irina alone, without explanation, making her feel forgotten and unnecessary in the most difficult moments of her life. But still, there was a closeness between them, albeit fragile, which connected them stronger than any words, even if it was based on Irina's desire alone. Even when they experienced deep, almost intimate moments of unity, he still found a reason to distract himself, as if he did not allow himself to completely dissolve in it. He always remained wary, as if he was afraid to trust completely, and this caution became not a wall, but a whole fortress guarding his heart. It seemed to bristle with sharp thorns, ready to injure anyone who decided to get too close, and Irina felt this more and more strongly every day. Looking back, Irina realized that perhaps she had known from the very beginning that he had married her, not because he really wanted to, but for some other reason. But even then, she was truly happy when her boss one day told her that Ciel wanted to marry her, and her heart filled with hope. She was so happy that she couldn't even think about anything else, as if the whole world had shrunk to one thought. She would become his wife, and would always be by his side. Even now, he looked as attractive as ever, with the same cold beauty that had once captured her heart and made her entirely his. After this came the news that following them was the daughter of Asteris, a saint whose appearance could change everything and bring with it unexpected consequences. She was greeted with honor, the crown prince showed respect, and Ciel remained just as reserved, hiding behind his calm what he really felt. Everyone around was in complete shock when they saw real live flowers, which no one expected, because it was a rare miracle, not typical for this time. Irina's brother, David, was even embarrassed by how beautiful and graceful his sister looked, like a completely different person compared to her previous image. Meanwhile, Irina recalled the words from her past life. Ciel was considered an S-class esper, and he was definitely not someone that a B-class conductor like her could handle. Therefore, if she has even a drop of conscience, she should leave, disappear from his life, so as not to become a burden for him or a source of new problems. At that moment, she realized who was in front of her. It was Soyeon, and they were too similar for it to be a simple coincidence, as if the past had returned. In her past life, Lee Soyeon was an S-class guide who despised Irina's presence near Ciel and constantly made her life extremely miserable. She tried to humiliate Irina in every way possible to show her superiority. And now it seemed that this same Soyeon had become the main character in the new world and had gained the status of a saint from another dimension, which caused Irina mixed feelings and anxiety. David noticed that his sister was acting strangely, as if she was hiding something. He couldn't figure out what was going on, but her behavior seemed unusual to him. So he turned to Irina and said that the saint looked so magical and extraordinarily beautiful, as if she had come down from heaven to brighten this day with her presence. Irina only calmly agreed with his words, trying not to show even the slightest sign that she already knew the saint much better than the others. However, David also noted that despite the appearance of the saint, he was still sure that his sister remained the most beautiful girl among all those he had seen. Irina responded by gently asking her brother to stop saying such things, especially now that they were not at home, but among many influential people. She added that she had heard his words perfectly well, and he had just admitted that he did not regret what he had said at all, which made her sigh slightly. However, now all this seemed of no particular importance, because what was happening around was much more important than such conversations between them. After all, Irina had already died once in Korea, and now the past had nothing to do with her. All that remained were memories that could not be escaped. Meanwhile, the crown prince turned to the saint and said that it must have been divine will that she celebrate her coming-of-age ceremony alongside the imperial family. After this, he asked the saint a question, trying to speak respectfully. What was her name? Because everyone was curious to know the name of the new chosen one of the gods. The saint replied with a slight smile that her name was Lee So-yuan, and added that she was looking forward to getting to know everyone better and sharing this important day. After her words, all those present began to greet the saint, admiringly uttering compliments and affirming that she was simply amazingly beautiful and full of grace. Meanwhile, Ciel glanced at the crowd and suddenly noticed one girl there who instantly caught his attention among the many faces. It was a girl with soft pink hair that shimmered in the lights of the hall, making her stand out from the rest of those present. She was standing next to some tall guy, and when Ciel looked more closely, he could clearly see her face, which seemed very familiar to him. At this point, Irina's mother suggested that she pray to calm her thoughts and focus on the solemn moment, because there was still much to come. The coming-of-age ceremony culminated in a solemn prayer, recited while everyone gazed at Irene's star, which had once shone brighter than all others in the sky. Irina turned her gaze to the distant star and mentally said that even after 10 long years, she still could not understand why God had transferred her to the world of this novella that she had once read. But this was her first truly kind and hospitable family, and therefore she fervently asked heaven to allow her to live with them always, for as long as possible. She dreamed of spending as much time with them as possible, because now it was the most precious and valuable thing in her life. After the prayer, the mother, with a smile and warmth in her voice, blessed Irina for a further happy life. Following the mother, the father and brother also spoke words of blessing, putting sincere care and love into them. It was incredibly pleasant to listen to this, and therefore Irina involuntarily became embarrassed, blushed, and yet could not hold back a warm smile. At that moment, they were informed that the elegant carriage of Count Tepetan, who had arrived for the celebration, had arrived at the mansion. All guests arrived in a strict order, corresponding to their status, and in exactly the same order, they had to pay their respects and congratulations. Irina had to wait a little, despite the fact that she and her family came out to the guests quite early and were prepared for the reception in advance. After the completion of the coming-of-age ceremony, the girl did not stop feeling a pleasant and warm feeling growing somewhere deep inside. It might have been the sunny weather, but her father noted that she was most likely expecting some special gift to celebrate her new status as a grown woman. He even said that he would fulfill everything that her soul desired, because this day should be unforgettable and joyful for her. He mentioned that she had once spoken about onions and suggested asking for one as a gift, promising that he would definitely buy one. Mom asked again in surprise if Irina had really just said the word onion, as if she couldn't believe her ears. Irina immediately realized that the situation was awkward, because her father and brother immediately became noticeably frightened and looked at each other. She believed that 10 years ago she was able to move into this world only because the real Irina died tragically. She suffocated during a terrible fire, and her family members decided that a real miracle occurred at the moment when their daughter, who was considered dead, suddenly came back to life right in her coffin. The family rejoiced, believing that this was nothing less than a manifestation of divine intervention sent from above. But ever since then, her mother has taken strict security measures to ensure that something like this never happens again. Irina was constantly worried that something dangerous was threatening her, so she was forbidden to leave the estate alone, and was also strictly forbidden to touch dangerous objects. Mother Elena told Irina not to even think about getting a bow, because it could lead to injuries. And what if something bad happens, and then who would take responsibility? But Irina replied that she was now an adult, and was no longer going to just sit on the sidelines and watch what was happening, as if it didn't concern her at all. She said she didn't want to stand by any longer, watching Father Arthur and David fight and risk their lives every time monsters appeared on their lands. Irina added that she wanted to fight alongside them, side by side, as a true member of the de Cloche family, and not remain weak and helpless. Mother Elena replied that she did not want to allow a situation in which she could lose Irina again, because this had already happened once, and the pain still had not left her. At that moment, Baron de Cloche's carriage arrived at the estate, and everyone present turned their gaze to it, realizing that the guest had arrived on important business. Brother David said that since the guest had already arrived, they should go out to greet him properly, without keeping him waiting too long. But suddenly, David noticed that Irina staggered and began to fall straight to the floor, as if she had lost her strength, and this happened so unexpectedly that he did not have time to catch her. He was confused and did not understand what was happening to Irina, because she looked very strange, as if her consciousness had left her body. Her parents were also very scared for her and did not understand what exactly had happened, because just a minute ago she looked completely normal. When Irina opened her eyes, it seemed to her that she found herself in a very familiar place, as if she had been transported somewhere from the past. She realized that she was in the apartment where she once lived with Ciel, in the world where her previous life ended. A few moments later, her husband, the same Ciel she loved so much, and whom she had not seen for a long time, entered the room. He was surprised that Irina had already come to her senses, and immediately approached her, holding ice and a clean towel in his hands to help. He said that it was still very early, so he wanted her to rest a little and sleep some more, so as not to overexert herself. Irina couldn't understand what was happening. Everything seemed strange and unreal, as if it was a dream from which she didn't want to wake up. She thought that perhaps she had somehow returned to her past life, although she didn't know how that could have happened. Ciel told her to wear a turtleneck tomorrow, because there was a noticeable hickey on her neck that no one else should see. He also added that she needed to eat some ice, because it would help bring down the fever and bring her back to normal. He himself carefully fed Irina pieces of ice, trying to make her feel comfortable and at ease. Irina felt a pleasant coolness in her mouth, and she felt much better, as if her body was calming down. She looked at Ciel for a long moment, and he thought that she probably wanted some more ice, and prepared to give her some more. These words made Duke Leopard smile unexpectedly, and even become slightly embarrassed, as if this was something unusual for him. He didn't say anything, just took a small piece of ice and put it in his mouth, feeling the cold on his tongue. After that, he slowly approached Irina, as if he was going to do something special, and passed the ice to her with a kiss. Irina liked this unexpected action. It seemed to her that at that moment the world stopped just for the two of them, and then she suddenly realized that everything that was happening was too beautiful to be true, and perhaps it was just a dream about what she always wanted from Ciel, about warmth, closeness, and attention that had previously been only a dream. When she opened her eyes and woke up in her home, 3 whole days had already passed since she lost consciousness. Mother Elena, with a look of relief on her face, told Irina everything that had happened during this time, not hiding her joy at her awakening. When Irina suddenly fell unconscious due to a high fever, the whole family was in a panic, not understanding what to do or how to help. But by chance, Duke Leopard happened to be nearby, passing by, and witnessed what happened to her at that moment. He immediately asked what had happened, quickly called a doctor, and even arranged for them to be transferred home through the portal, so that they could take care of her. Irina still can't believe that Ciel from this world, the same Duke Leopard she knew from the book, helped her. But what was more important, she was troubled by the thought that the fever that had gripped her then was clearly not an ordinary illness, but the fever of someone awakening. It was a symptom that all espers and conduits experienced before their abilities awakened, and she knew it all too well. From her past life experience as Soyun, she immediately understood that this feeling could not be confused with anything else. It was the heat of an awakening guide. And yet it seemed a little strange, and even illogical, because everything in this story should have gone differently. In the Storm Empire, there have never been any guides except for Saint Soyon, who appeared from another world, and the Crown Prince and Ciel, who absorbed the stabilization. And it was precisely because of her appearance that the very battle broke out, where the fate of all who were drawn into this conflict was decided. Therefore, Irina could not understand where her awakening as a conductor came from, because this should not have happened. She couldn't find an answer to the question of what caused this strange and dangerous phenomenon, and this frightened her. The imperial palace of Stern spread out majestically, as if reminding of its power and importance in this world. In one of the luxurious offices sat Duke Leopard, thoughtfully looking at the documents, but his thoughts were far from here. He thought about what had happened 3 days ago, and each time he came to the same conclusion that worried him. The lady, who had then fallen unconscious, muttered the saint's name without even having time to properly introduce herself before she left his consciousness. He distinctly heard her say the name Soyeon before she was taken out of the hall, and that fact never left his mind. It felt like Irina had met her before, like there was some hidden connection between them. Moreover, the symptoms that he managed to notice then clearly resembled the heat of an awakening force. The appearance of another gifted person in the Empire was a rare miracle in itself, but if she also knew Soyeon, it was even more amazing. Perhaps Irina had received a divine revelation, just as he had once, and had ended up here, coming from Korea, as if by someone's will. His last memories before returning here were of his beloved wife saying goodbye to him. He clearly remembered the moment when his wife, Seo-hyun, sacrificed her life for him without a second thought. She seemed to melt right in front of him, disappearing under the pressure of his unbearably enormous power, which he could not contain. He could not comprehend that she was actually dying in his arms. He did not believe this terrible moment. He begged, asked her to wake up, tried to bring her back with his voice and touch. But it was useless. He didn't want to accept the truth, and at the last moment, he simply held her close, afraid to let go. When he realized that his wife had died, the world for him collapsed completely, losing all meaning. The rage that had subsided inside began to boil again with unprecedented force, like a raging fire bursting out. So he didn't hesitate to burn himself along with his dead wife, so that he wouldn't have to feel that pain anymore. And then he plunged into an endless darkness, which seemed eternal, from which, as it seemed to him, there was no return. But suddenly, he heard a voice that echoed both in his head and in his heart, as if awakening him from oblivion. The voice told him that he needed to look not only for the threads of the star, but for the star itself, in order to fulfill his destiny. This was the path he was obliged to take for the sake of the coming time of the Empire, even if it seemed impossible. And then he opened his eyes, and that was how he returned to his homeland, to the Stern Empire, as if rising from the darkness. This happened sometime before his meeting with So-hyun, whom he still couldn't forget. About 2 weeks have passed since then, filled with waiting and searching for answers. Probably, there was the will of divine powers in all this. But now, something completely different was more important to him. Now that the saint had appeared, he still hoped to return to Korea and start over with So-hyun. He was looking for someone with whom he had long since stopped wanting to have any connection, someone whom he had deliberately avoided all these years. There was only one reason that pushed him to do this. He wanted to cross dimensions and find his So-hyun, no matter what. And suddenly, he experienced a powerful shock when he unexpectedly saw her right in front of him, alive and real. But he soon realized that this was not the real So-hyun, but only a vision, a bizarre game of his tormented mind. However, she smiled so softly and warmly that my heart sank painfully, as if she were really there. The Duke literally laid everything out before his eyes, as if he were trying to put his surroundings in order to make it easier to concentrate. Irina de Cloche was his wife, his first and only guide, the person for whom he was ready to do anything. Even if he never managed to return to the Empire again, the thought of a possible meeting with Irina completely overshadowed any fears and regrets that might torment his soul. He simply embraced the air in front of him, as if his wife really was there, among the invisible lines of space, and this gave him at least some relief. But he soon realized that so far, it had all been in vain, and he suddenly felt helpless, as if his strength was leaving him with every passing minute. The cough of blood crept through his lungs again, causing his body to twitch in pain and adding to the feeling of vulnerability and powerlessness. Every breath was given to him with great difficulty. His breathing became rare and intermittent, as if the air was constricting his lungs, not allowing him to live normally. The pain from not being able to breathe fully was such that it felt like my throat was being squeezed in an iron vice. And at the same time, I had to remember Irina's words, that it was time for stabilization, for restoration of strength. The Duke took out a small bottle from his bag, prepared in case of such attacks, to ease his condition and regain control over his body. He drank the contents of the bottle, feeling it gently warm his throat and lungs, helping them to relax and regain the ability to breathe without fear or pain. After that, he was able to take a deep breath again, feeling how fresh air filled his chest, and again gave him strength to move forward. Previously, when he encountered similar difficulties, the power of his ex-wife and holy water were enough to solve the problem, and this was enough to stabilize the condition. At this stage, he might need additional stabilization of holy water even before the upcoming meeting with Irina, in order to prepare his body and soul for emotional stress. From the moment he began to pay more attention to Lady de Cloche, every gesture and glance of hers aroused in him a strange feeling which he could not fully explain. Irina, in some small ways, strangely reminded him of Sohyun, his past life, and who she was before reincarnation, awakening memories that seemed alive and almost tangible. He could not understand at all what exactly this similarity consisted of, noticing only a mole under her eye, which connected her with a past life and caused an incomprehensible nostalgia. At that moment, there was a knock at the door, and the Duke allowed them to enter, remaining confused and trying to understand what was happening and who could be on the threshold. The butler reported that another seasonal letter had arrived from Mr. Aiden, and despite the Duke's habit of ignoring minor notices, this letter attracted his attention. Mr. Aiden ordered the butler to place the letter in the chest where he usually kept such documents, so that no one would notice or touch it. As the butler was about to leave, the Duke asked him to stop, sensing that this letter contained something important and required personal attention. He demanded that the butler give him the letter, and as he held it in his hands, he felt a slight thrill, a premonition that the information inside could change the course of events. As the Duke opened the letter, he remembered that his younger brother Aiden had always been a sensitive boy, easily irritated by even the slightest disturbance, and he now realized that the contents of the letter could affect him especially acutely. As time went on, Aiden's behavior became increasingly erratic, and he was eventually diagnosed with a mental disorder. As a result, Aiden was practically locked in a separate annex, where he spent his days alone, unable to leave freely. Before Irina returned to the past, Aiden kept his distance from his brother, not feeling any particular affection for him and not wanting to get closer, because the past relationship between them left only coldness and misunderstanding. However, after encountering a wide variety of ability manifestations in Korea, Irina came to understand a lot about the nature of their unusual abilities, how espers interact with the world around them, and how much this affects their behavior and perception. It then became clear that the strange symptoms Aiden was experiencing were not signs of a mental disorder at all, but were normal manifestations of his esper abilities, which manifested themselves from the mental side and needed proper understanding and support. Realizing this, Irina informed the butler that she needed to meet her younger brother as soon as possible to explain the situation to him and help him master his abilities, as well as to calm him down so that he would stop suffering from unnecessary fear and isolation. The Leapart estate, an annex, was quietly intimate. The walls were covered with heavy curtains, and only a weak light penetrated through a small window, creating the feeling of a closed world for Aiden. Seal came there determined to meet his brother in person. He understood that this meeting could change a lot in their lives, restore trust, and give Aiden a chance to understand his true nature. He swung the doors open to enter, and the air in the room seemed to flutter as his gaze immediately met Aiden's, who was sitting up in bed, trying to figure out what was going on. Seal turned to Aiden, watching his every move carefully, knowing that his younger brother needed support and explanation, not harsh actions or pressure, to understand the truth about himself. Aiden looked both cute and strange. His posture was unusual, as if he was not fully aware of his own body and what was happening around him, but his eyes still showed curiosity and fear at the same time. He was extremely surprised when he saw his older brother, not believing his eyes, not expecting that Seal would come personally to help, because for Aiden, it seemed like an incredible and almost fantastic event. He couldn't believe that in front of him was really his older brother, the same Ciel who always seemed unattainable and distant, and now stood next to him, ready to explain everything and support, as if the wall of mistrust between them was crumbling. Seal stepped closer and gently grabbed Aiden's shoulders to hold his gaze, to show that this was serious, and to help his younger brother focus on the words that were supposed to change the way he perceived himself. Aiden had no idea what his older brother was doing, why he was so close, or what was going to happen now. His mind was filled with conflicting emotions and a feeling of unexpected closeness. Seal asked Aiden to listen to him carefully, emphasizing the importance of the moment, explaining that this was not just a conversation, but a step towards understanding himself and his abilities, which cannot be ignored or taken superficially. He informed his younger brother that he had no mental disorder at all, that all assumptions about a morbid condition were wrong, and that in fact, he had a special gift that needed to be developed and accepted as part of himself. All this meant that Aiden was actually an esper, but he had no idea what that meant, or what possibilities were now opening up for him, how to use his abilities and deal with the inner voices and strange sensations. After these words, Ciel hugged his brother tightly, as if he wanted to convey some of his strength and confidence, to make it clear that now Aiden is not alone, that there is someone nearby who understands and is ready to support him in everything. Aiden felt this warmth and support, but internally, he still couldn't understand what exactly was happening. His mind was trying to comprehend the information, and his body was reacting to his older brother's touch, creating a mixture of surprise and relief. Seal said that now Aiden would no longer have to remain locked within four walls, that he would be able to gradually go out into the world and master his abilities without feeling the pressure or fear that previously bound him every day. After that, Ciel sat down next to him on the bed, staying close so that Aiden felt his support and understood that every step in mastering his abilities would be under supervision and with care, and not with condemnation. Aiden asked again if he was really an esper, trying to make sense of all the information, checking how much it matched his own feelings, and trying to find a logical explanation for what was happening. In the past, Ciel had said that every person had two sides, and now he wanted to understand why Aiden thought that way, trying to connect his inner experiences with the nature of esper abilities and mental activity. Aiden explained that he hears other people's voices in his head that interfere with his ability to concentrate and live his normal life, creating tension and a feeling of constant presence of other people's thoughts that cannot be ignored. He added that when he tries to silence these voices so as not to hear them, people around him look at him strangely, not understanding what is happening and considering his behavior unusual or even strange, which only increases his isolation. When Aiden told this to the butler and maids, they did not answer, did not comment on anything, and did not try to help, as if they were trying to ignore his experiences and not interfere, leaving their younger brother alone with his problems. There were indeed smiles on their faces, but they only understood that Aiden was different, and in their opinion, might be mentally ill, unaware of his real abilities and the true nature of his inner world. Now, it became clear why the servants working in the extension left work so quickly and did not stay for long, despite the fact that the premises were well appointed and comfortable. And when someone from the Leopard family can show signs of mental instability, it is in no way similar to the behavior of Ciel's brother, who is distinguished by a cold mind and clear logic. They couldn't believe it, and gradually came to the conclusion that it would be easier to just lock him in a room, leave him alone, and keep quiet to avoid unnecessary problems. The voices around him continued to discuss things he didn't want to hear at all, creating tension and irritation in every conversation, causing him to close off. Seltok knew for sure that her brother was an esper and was capable of using telepathy, which explained his unusual reactions to others and to guess other people's thoughts. He could even read the minds of others, picking up on their emotions and intentions, making his presence both frightening and attractive to those around him. However, he said that he loved being around his brother, because when he was around him, he didn't hear any extraneous thoughts and felt the long-awaited peace and quiet. Perhaps this is explained by the fact that his abilities are significantly higher than Aiden's, and this is what creates a special distance and understanding between them. After this, the brother asked Aiden to listen to him carefully so that he would understand the seriousness of what was happening and be able to respond correctly to the consequences of his actions. Due to the use of their powers, the esper experiences side effects in the form of pain, which only becomes stronger over time and requires constant control and endurance. But he needs to learn to tolerate this pain, because it is part of his development and training, without which his abilities will not be able to fully develop. He is even able to cope with it until his own guide appears, who can share his suffering and ease it at least a little. At the same time, he should never rely entirely on the powers of other guides or saints, since this weakens his own strength and hinders independent development. However, Aiden did not understand why this was so, because he believed that one should feel gratitude towards the saint, because she came to serve the Empire, where there are almost no guides, carrying out a difficult mission. This was indeed true, and there was a truth in it that was difficult to dispute, since the service of the saint brought significant help and strengthened the position of the Empire. Aiden's reaction to the inhabitants of the Empire, in which all this was customary to be revered as a manifestation of the daughter of the goddess, was quite understandable, because upbringing and traditions greatly influenced his perception. And Ciel, at first, also blindly believed in her during the time travel, trusting her power and intentions, believing that this was the natural order of things in their world and in their empire. Sveta said that in her homeland, Korea, there are many guides who have unusual abilities and can make significant changes to the world around them. And then the crown prize winner asked if this meant that she would be able to bring even more guides to them, expanding the circle of those who could help them and strengthen their position. The saint smiled, and Irene de Cloche felt that it was truly so, as if the saint's words were imbued with truth and an inner light that could not be ignored. Aiden believed the saint's words that she was able to bring guides, and in his head, the understanding gradually formed that these were not just empty promises, but a real opportunity that could not be dismissed. He followed the saint through the interdimensional gate, feeling the air around him tremble slightly, and feeling how space and time seemed to stretch, allowing him to go where no one had gone before. And then Aiden arrived in Korea, a country he had only seen on a map and heard about its events, not expecting that the reality would be so different and unpredictable than he could have imagined. He had no idea then that the saint did not care at all about the welfare of the Empire, that her actions had ulterior motives, and that every word was carefully weighed for her own purpose, and that she was able to open the gates between dimensions only because she decided to take this step, possessing rare courage and power, inaccessible to ordinary people and espers. By the time Aiden realized that the saint had brought him to Korea for the purpose of using him, it was too late, and by that point, he was effectively tied hand and foot by the espers of the Korean government and the Conduit Alliance, with no way to retreat. He knew that he was a rare S-class expert who could use both fire and wind at the same time, which made him a valuable resource, and in the eyes of the authorities, his skills could solve many strategic problems, which they immediately tried to take advantage of. They intended to keep Aiden in the country by attempting to forcibly establish ties between him and Saint Sohyun, believing that working with her would increase their control over his powers and help them use his abilities for the good of the country. However, the percentage of their compatibility turned out to be extremely low, which was a surprise to everyone, because their abilities seemed like an ideal pair for merging, but reality showed that there was almost no natural harmony between them. The saint believed that this was simply impossible, unwilling to accept the fact that even her foresight and power were unable to overcome the natural limitations dictated by the very structure of the world. She screamed that this simply couldn't be, and her voice echoed through the compatibility room, filling the space with despair and anxiety, as if the universe itself was protesting against her beliefs. Seo-hyun refused to accept the fact that their compatibility was so low, and it turned out that Aiden's results were almost the same with other guides, which further increased the feeling of hopelessness, as they were about to come to the conclusion that Aiden was incompatible with the Earth guides because he came from another dimension. The tension in the room reached its breaking point, and everyone present realized that they were facing a unique and difficult situation. By chance, Seo-hyun happened to be in the compatibility room, witnessing what was happening and feeling that her presence could play a key role, although the fact that she appeared there was accidental and unpredictable. At first, Aiden outright hated her, believing that her interference would complicate his situation, that her views and actions would contradict his own intentions and plans, creating additional tension. Meanwhile, he was brought out of his thoughts by his younger brother, who appeared in the room as if a reminder of family ties and responsibilities that he could not ignore, distracting Aiden from his own worries. Seal immediately apologized for the unexpected interruption, explaining that he was just lost in thought for a moment and his appearance was accidental. But at that moment, it was this that allowed Aiden to momentarily take a break and look at what was happening from a different angle. If he starts talking about the world right now and presenting her in an unfavorable light, it can only make him suspicious and distrustful of his own motives. Seal realized that he had to be careful with every word he said, even to his younger brother, so as not to give away too much and keep the secret. He realized that he could not do without the help of his younger brother, and this would become a decisive step in their joint tactics and observations. The younger brother asked again about his intentions, and Ciel explained that he wanted him to go with him to Cloche's domain to work together. Their joint presence will allow them to better understand the thoughts and intentions of Lady Irina Cloche, revealing her inner world and hidden motives. Meanwhile, Irina went outside, enjoying the sunny day, and noted to herself that the weather today was surprisingly pleasant and fresh. At the Cloche home, the family gathered for dinner, quietly discussing the day's events and enjoying their time together, unaware of the hidden observers. From the moment Irina awakened as a guide, her life acquired a special regularity and calm, as if she had found harmony again. Her days passed peacefully and measuredly, almost devoid of unexpected events, as if repeating the usual rhythm of life before awakening. After all, unlike espers, conductors do not exhibit any special traits after awakening, and in the absence of an esper nearby, Irina is no different from an ordinary person. However, one change in her appearance is still noticeable, and it leaves no doubt that the awakening has left its mark. This is a burn scar that Irina received before she woke up in this body, which has become part of her new reality and appearance. Over time, the scar changed shape, and its outlines began to resemble neat flower buds, giving it an unusual and almost aesthetic form. Perhaps this change is directly related to her awakening and the characteristics that appeared along with the new essence of the conductor. Mother asked Irina if she would go to the training ground today, and Irina quietly replied that she wanted to devote time to archery, feeling a surge of energy and determination. Mother, although slightly disappointed, still nodded and agreed, understanding that sometimes it was necessary to allow her daughter to choose her own path and practice what interested her. She warned Irina to be careful, look after herself, and have a good time, hoping that the classes would bring her not only benefit, but also joy, which is so important for her mood now. Irina's awakening as a conductor remained a secret, so the sudden heat wave surprised everyone, and Mother blamed herself, feeling very guilty for not being able to foresee such a change in her daughter's condition. It was hard to watch her suffer, but it was this that accidentally weakened her mother's excessive care, allowing Irina to gradually gain more freedom and self-confidence. Now Irina could freely practice on the court, exploring her abilities, which she could previously only dream of, sitting in her room and watching others training outside the windows. In her past life, her training was purely a necessity for survival, every exercise aimed at staying alive in a cruel and unfair world. But now her goal took on a new meaning. She wanted to protect any family that gained her trust, making training not just a way to survive, but an act of caring and strength that could save others. The Cloche Guards' training grounds were filled with the familiar atmosphere of the gentle wind, the sounds of bowstrings being pulled, and the quiet rustling of leaves, creating the perfect place for focused technical work. It was here that Irina, with a bow in her hands, repeated the movements, pulled the bowstring, and accurately released arrows, gradually improving her accuracy and strength, feeling how with each shot her confidence in her abilities grew. The wind was blowing against her, slightly shaking the arrows, but this only added to the difficulty and taught Irina to better sense the situation, adapt to the conditions, and control every movement with full concentration. She understood that training was for everyone and that everyone makes mistakes, so small difficulties were a natural part of the process and could not interfere with her focus and desire for mastery. The father and mother, watching their daughter, were sure that Irina would definitely succeed, feeling pride and awe because she was learning not only to wield a bow, but also to control herself, her emotions, and inner strength. After a short pause, Irina concentrated and released the arrow, watching as it accurately hit the target, and her heart filled with quiet delight that every effort of hers brought tangible results. And yet she hit the mark, as if every gesture and movement she made had been calculated in advance, and the result exceeded all expectations of those around her. Both the father and the brother, and Irina herself, were amazed by this moment. An incredible feeling simultaneously surprised and delighted them, as if something magical was happening. It seemed impossible that Irina was able to hit the bull's-eye on her first try, as if fate itself was guiding her hand. And this left everyone in slight amazement. It was truly amazing. His girl could quite compete with the guards, showing a rare dexterity and accuracy that no one expected. Irina listened to how sincerely her family appreciated her success. Perhaps some of her luck was due to the wind, but it was nice to hear such words from loved ones. She suggested that in the future, they could organize competitions with the guards, and her father immediately agreed, noting that this would be an excellent opportunity to develop the skills of the family and young espers. There had been a noticeable reduction in the number of monsters lately, and the boys had relaxed a bit. These exercises at least gave them some kind of task and kept up their fighting spirit. Seal watched everything that was happening from the hill, carefully following every movement and assessing Irina's abilities, as if checking how ready she was for future trials. The very next day after these events, when Ciel turned to Aiden for help, plans for a new journey began to take concrete shape. They went to Cloche, concealing their identities, since the journey was unofficial. This spontaneous impulse forced them to act cautiously and inconspicuously, but they did not take into account one important nuance. There were no portals in Cloche, which made the trip more difficult and required additional tricks for movement. So they had to go through a portal to the nearby Le Mans region to get to the right place, planning their next steps along the way. To travel on land, they used a carriage, which allowed them to remain hidden and not attract unnecessary attention on the way to their destination. They arrived at their destination early in the day, when the first rays of the sun were just touching the ground, creating an atmosphere of freshness and anticipation of new events. The entrance to the Cloche estate was calm, with the feeling that an important and possibly fateful adventure awaited them ahead. As soon as they entered, Aiden immediately fell asleep, apparently too tired after the long and exhausting journey, which took all his strength and attention. Seal, meanwhile, quietly slipped away to conduct reconnaissance, carefully moving through the surrounding area, listening to every sound and assessing the situation around him. He headed towards Cloche's house and, as he approached, noticed Irina standing near the entrance. Her presence instantly attracted attention and caused a strong feeling of surprise. In fact, he was shocked when he saw her. A mixture of confusion and memories of the past flashed in Ciel's eyes, because her image awakened long-forgotten emotions. Realizing he had to act, he used magic to catch the wind and guide Irina to the right place, as if an invisible force was carefully guiding her path. Without realizing it, Ciel used a power that was reminiscent of the past when he helped So-hyun. It was something deep and familiar, almost like an old reflex. But just now, when Irina held the bow, Ciel couldn't tear his eyes away, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu, as if the past had come to life before his eyes. She looked exactly like So-hyun. Every feature, every movement was reminiscent of her previous life, causing Ciel to feel a mixture of surprise and anxiety. He could not understand how they could be so similar. The idea of coincidence seemed too simple, too incredible, to be accepted without question. Perhaps it was not a coincidence at all. There was a feeling inside him that there was some deeper connection behind it, invisible and mysterious. Even Irina's smallest habits in handling a bow mimicked So-hyun's movements, and Ciel couldn't help but compare her every action with memories of the past. Then Irina's father caught his attention. Ciel instantly realized that the situation could become dangerous, and he needed to act carefully, without attracting unnecessary attention. He landed not far from Irina's father, trying to look calm and confident, ready for any development of events and the possible reaction of the master. Ciel removed his hood to show respect in a friendly manner, as diplomatic manners required him to observe all formalities in front of Irina's father. In response, the gentleman greeted Duke Leopard with due respect, acknowledging his status and cautiously assessing the situation, preparing for further dialogue. After that, they agreed to hold a separate meeting where they could discuss important issues without prying eyes and prying ears, leaving room for private negotiations. First of all, he had to admit that all this happened completely unexpectedly and was not planned in advance by any of the participants. The Duke began to explain that his purpose was only to show his brother the surroundings of the Empire and give him the opportunity to get to know the dominions more personally. The lady asked whether he was talking about his brother Aiden, and the Duke confirmed that he was talking about him without hiding any details. At that time, the lady did not understand at all why, of all the available regions, their attention stopped specifically on the territory belonging to the Cloche family. The Duke explained that they had visited other areas of the Empire as well, trying to explore several options for their observations and tests. Having heard that there was no portal in these lands, they decided to personally verify this and make sure that the information was true. His explanation seemed clear enough, and at first glance, it seemed logical that he was simply doing his job. Therefore, the Duke could not understand why Monsieur Cloche reacted to his words with obvious wariness and distrust. The father asked a direct question about why Ciel was still watching his daughter and trying to understand her behavior in different situations. At this point, Ciel tensed up, feeling like his intentions were starting to be perceived differently than he had planned, and it was creating tension. He finally realized what the misunderstanding was. He needed to say directly that he had come to conduct his own investigation into his daughter's relationship. Since Mr. Cloche looked suspicious, this idea did not seem the best, so he decided to explain everything as a simple coincidence. He tried to convey to the gentleman that he had rarely met a lady who handled a bow so confidently and skillfully, demonstrating rare skills. His gaze, as if by itself, constantly returned to her, unable to tear itself away, as if drawn by an invisible force, and this feeling remained perceptible to everyone around. Ciel hoped that the girl's father would share his opinion, and he said that he completely agreed, emphasizing that he was not bragging, but only expressing a sincere appreciation of her merits. Her skills were truly amazing and awe-inspiring. Every gesture and movement she made was precise, and her skills seemed to develop at an incredible speed, leaving everyone in amazement. Ciel noticed that this made him unable to look away, and his father, hearing this, confirmed that he felt only pride for his daughter, appreciating her efforts and ability to keep the situation under control. Everyone around her considered it almost a miracle that she had only held a bow in her hands for a week and was already demonstrating amazing accuracy and the ability to hit the target accurately, astounding every observer. Every day, her arrows hit the targets without fail, and this became the subject of conversation, causing admiration and surprise in everyone who watched her training and successes. At this point, the Duke thought that he seemed to have finally understood how to structure communication with the Baron so that it would be productive and would not raise unnecessary questions. The Baron asked if the Duke was staying at the inn, and he confirmed that he had recently arrived and had already paid for the room, showing his readiness for any suggestions and correct interaction. He also noted that it was extremely difficult to find suitable housing for a nobleman near their estate, so the Baron offered hospitality in his home, which was an unexpected and important gesture. The Duke was completely unprepared for such generosity and was very surprised to hear an offer that simultaneously demonstrated respect and concern for his convenience. This solution seemed much better than all the other options, and besides, the Duke had already helped Irina when she lost consciousness in the Imperial Palace, and now considered this gesture a natural continuation of support. He sent a doctor and allowed her to use the portal, thanks to which Irina quickly recovered and was able to actively participate in affairs again, which significantly eased her condition. Therefore, he considers it fair to ask for compensation for the kindness shown, believing that such services and attention deserve at least symbolic gratitude. The Duke listened attentively and, after a short pause, agreed to the proposal, showing his readiness to support the decision without unnecessary hesitation, which surprised everyone present. He made the decision with gratitude, willing to take into account all the nuances and show respect for the offer that was made to him, demonstrating tact and strategic thinking. At that very moment, Lady Irina's maid hurried to her, telling her of the urgent need to change clothes, as if she felt the importance of what was happening and did not want to waste a minute. Mary, who was Irina's personal maid, persistently explained the situation, although Irina herself did not understand why this was required now, and was surprised by such a sudden order. The maid explained that Duke Leopard had arrived at their estate for a visit, and this news had a strong effect on Irina, causing her to feel tension and anticipation of something important. The surprise increased when Mary added that Mr. Aiden Leopard would soon be arriving, and that preparations for the visit were now taking over the entire house, involving all servants and family members in a single organization. Irina felt a strange bliss upon hearing that the Duke would be in her home. In her inner world, it felt like an unexpected twist of fate that had not been in the original story. The most important thing for her was that Esper, the wielder of power, decided to visit her in person, which filled her with anxiety and curiosity at the same time, forcing her to listen to every nuance. She had barely had time to recover from her awakening as a guide, and the sudden news forced her to concentrate in order to act carefully and thoughtfully in the new circumstances. She had to be careful not to let the Duke notice the signs of her gift too early, otherwise the consequences could be unpredictable and dangerous for herself. The maid turned to Irina again, insistently reminding her that it was time to hurry to her room, because time does not wait, and preparation requires precision and speed in order to get everything done on time. Irina nodded in understanding and without delay set off with Mary, following her with a quick but determined step, completely focused on the events ahead. Meanwhile, the Duke was in a state of mild shock and contemplation, wondering if he too needed to change clothes in order to look appropriate in the eyes of his family and guests, without losing his dignity. The maid approached him with the recommendation that Mr. David should also change his clothes, so that everyone present would correspond to the formality of the visit and the atmosphere of the estate. Irina followed the maid, feeling how all the preparation and tension filled the estate, as if the atmosphere itself was saturated with anticipation and slight excitement of the upcoming meetings. At this point, she knew that conductors tended to unconsciously emit a stabilizing aura, and she had to be careful not to accidentally reveal the power too early and attract unnecessary attention. The attraction that arose within seemed almost physical, as if the body itself was reacting to the presence of someone important. Previously, Irina was able to keep this under control without effort, but now, after her recent awakening, everything was different, and the balance had not yet been restored. A chance encounter with the first person could cause an involuntary release of aura, and the possibility of this forced one to be cautious. Every movement required attention, because even the slightest mistake could reveal her hidden strength ahead of time. She was shocked when she entered the room and saw that he was already there, as if he had been expecting her arrival. Not knowing how to react, Irina watched him, and he, feeling her gaze, slowly turned in her direction. She had not expected at all to meet him here so quickly, and this increased her inner excitement. She felt a little embarrassed by the unexpected meeting when his eyes met hers. Mother Elena also did not hide her surprise when she noticed Irina in the room. Her face expressed a mixture of anxiety and bewilderment. Elena approached her daughter and quietly indicated that she should go upstairs, change her clothes with the help of the maid, and then go down to the dining room. The woman bowed to the Duke out of respect and informed Irina of her intention to come down soon, observing protocol and formalities. She specified that she would first accompany the gentleman to the dining room, and then Irina would join in so that everything would go smoothly. Irina bowed in response and immediately headed upstairs, feeling a slight excitement about the upcoming meeting. The Baroness calmly showed the Duke the way to the dining room, following the established rules of noble etiquette. She led him along while Irina stood on the stairs, watching his every move from afar. From above, she peered intently at the Duke, trying to catch every detail of his behavior and appearance. He was still incredibly handsome, exactly as he remained in her memory from her past life, causing a wave of memories. This sudden closeness and memories made her feel slightly embarrassed, barely containing her inner excitement. But Irina knew that she couldn't lose concentration for even a moment, because the slightest mistake could reveal her true past and jeopardize everything she had worked for. Soon, everyone gathered at the long table, each taking his place, looking attentively at the door and waiting for Irina to appear, because her presence meant the beginning of important events. The Baron felt a slight satisfaction, noticing the Duke's interest in their guards. This flattered his vanity, because not every high-ranking guest paid attention to servants and warriors. He understood that as a swordmaster, the Duke would inevitably pay attention to the Baron's subordinates, because such people always attract the attention and deserve the respect of an experienced warrior. In this regard, the Baron cautiously suggested visiting them the next day, hinting that a meeting with the Duke would delight the guards and bring pleasure to everyone present. The Duke merely smiled slightly in agreement, making it clear that it would be impolite to refuse such an offer and that he appreciated the attention and invitation. Not much time had passed before there was a knock at the door, and Irina, quietly crossing the threshold, entered, radiating calm and confidence, which she hid behind delicate restraint. The father noticed the rain and was immediately happy to see his daughter. Mother Elena and brother David also did not hide their smiles. Their faces were filled with warmth and joy of the meeting. The Duke and his younger brother Aiden felt slightly embarrassed, because Irina's presence added tension, and they tried to hide their emotions behind outward politeness and cold restraint. Irina came closer, bowed carefully, demonstrating respect, and introduced herself. Her movements were graceful and precise, as if every gesture had been thought out in advance. She apologized for failing to greet them properly earlier, gently explaining her delay and showing a sincere desire for proper etiquette and respect for guests. In addition, Irina expressed her pleasure at meeting the young Duke, Ciel's brother, emphasizing her attention to his status while leaving room for a slight friendly sympathy. He felt a slight joy at the meeting and introduced himself as Aiden, demonstrating confidence, restraint, and the usual manner of greeting for nobles. Irina was slightly surprised when he extended his hand to her in greeting, not expecting such a formal gesture. She always considered shaking hands to be a purely male tradition, and usually did not participate in such ceremonies herself. But despite her doubts, she still shook his hand, and he gently took her hand in his palm, lightly touching her skin with his lips in a familiar gesture. At that moment, Irina realized that this was just a greeting, typical for men of high social status, a way to express respect for a woman. True, there was a tradition among the nobles to kiss the back of a lady's hand as a sign of respect and politeness, and Aiden followed it perfectly. Irina forgot about this ritual, since she had never met other noblemen except her father and brother, and this was a new experience for her. Suddenly, the eldest Duke Ciel approached her with a majestic bearing and asked permission to also greet the lady, showing courtesy and respect. He gently took her hand and touched his lips to her skin, repeating the tradition of greeting and radiating nobility in every movement. When Ciel did this, his movements looked amazingly beautiful, almost like a scene from an old noble novel, attracting the eye. Irina felt her face flush, and embarrassment gradually filled her, mixing with a slight trepidation. After finishing the greeting, Ciel walked away, leaving her standing there, as if rooted to the spot, unable to immediately collect her thoughts. He advised her to sit down and even lifted the chair for her himself, demonstrating care and attention to her comfort, which embarrassed her even more. Irina felt both embarrassed and pleased by the care with which she was treated, which was unusual and touching for her. After this, everyone present took their seats, and the atmosphere gradually became calmer, but Irina still felt nervous. The Baron, noticing her confusion, suggested that everyone begin eating in order to soften the formality of the moment and focus attention on the dinner. Irina felt very embarrassed and did not know how to behave at the table, observing the grace of those present and their manners. She felt that the room was very warm, almost hot, which increased her inner excitement and confusion from new impressions. Aiden looked at her carefully, assessing her condition and mood, as if trying to understand her thoughts and reactions to what was happening. Throughout dinner, father, brother, and Duke Leopard talked only about monsters, discussing their danger and recent events, as if nothing else existed. This topic completely absorbed their attention, leaving no room for other conversations, and each participant tried to contribute something of his own, confirming his opinion. So everything went on as usual. The conversation continued, and slowly the shared meal came to an end, leaving behind a slight feeling of fatigue and familiar order. After a while, Irina was already sitting on her bed, leaning against the headboard, trying to collect her thoughts and calm her slightly racing heart after dinner. Usually, she didn't worry about whether the food was going down her throat correctly. It all seemed like a natural process that didn't require her constant attention and anxiety. But now she could breathe a deep sigh of relief, knowing that dinner had passed without incident, and she could finally relax a little alone. She clearly understood that this Duke Lepart was not the one she had known in the past, that he had changed, and everything around had a different character, different from the old memories. And yet, Irina couldn't completely stop being nervous in his presence, as if the image from her past life still appeared before her eyes, making her heart beat faster. At the same time, she did not understand at all why these feelings did not leave her, and desperately tried to find an answer to this strange internal conflict within herself. Perhaps it was because he had been staring at her all evening, watching her every move, and seeming to be assessing her, which added to her anxiety and embarrassment. She could not understand why the Duke needed to suddenly appear here, disrupt the usual order of her thoughts, and cause this strange confusion. Confusion filled her. She sighed heavily, feeling the internal tension growing, which could not be simply driven away or ignored. If their family had been a little more intimidating or strict, perhaps she wouldn't have had to deal with him, as caution would have been a natural defense. But that was not the case now. Although their family was indeed noble and preserved the long-standing traditions of the Stern Empire, they had not yet managed to accumulate much wealth through the family business. The restrictions remained noticeable. The reason for this was not only the economic side, but also the constant attacks of monsters, due to which the possessions became unsafe, which greatly hindered any plans for development. They explained over and over again that nearly 80% of all income went toward training guards, leaving little resources for anything else, but it was considered necessary. However, they still refused to enter into contracts with them, because the church in this region set up too high barriers, and any attempts to do business could turn into danger. Irina was dreaming of a way to make money quickly, like in Korea with lotteries and winnings, when suddenly an old thought connected with the past came to mind. She remembered that in the novella where her soul ended up, the saint once presented a dish brought from her homeland, and its unusual taste attracted the attention of all the inhabitants of the empire. These ingredients, from which the dish was prepared, became incredibly popular among people, and local traders quickly realized how much demand there was for the new products. The saint did not stay in these lands for long, so she did not have time to introduce the people to Korean cuisine in full, and her knowledge remained almost unclaimed. Irina realized that if she could get the rights to sell these ingredients first, she could build her own fortune and become influential in this field. Inwardly joyful, she immediately felt the excitement of the idea and decided that it was an excellent and promising plan that should be implemented as soon as possible. Irina planned to discuss everything with her father tomorrow, and in the meantime, a servant quietly entered the Duke's office to convey an important message and clarify the details of the upcoming day. He said that if the Duke needed anything, he would just have to ring the bell and all the necessary services would be performed without delay. Seal was already sitting on the couch and was seriously immersed in his thoughts, thinking about plans, decisions, and how events might unfold in the near future. If Irina had already awakened as a conduit, she could have released an aura that could influence the atmosphere around her and make her presence known with a power that did not require words. This was a typical mistake for newly awakened guides, and he expected at least some sense of power in her presence. But surprisingly, he felt nothing. The likelihood that she was an esper seemed much higher, as her behavior and energy seemed to suggest that. By accident, without fully controlling his abilities, he set the sofa on fire, and this became an unexpected demonstration of power. There was a clear imprint of his hand on the sofa, and it was also covered in dust, which emphasized the accidental nature of what happened. At that moment, the master realized that his power had manifested itself again, and this made him wonder about its nature. In truth, he secretly hoped that the lady would be a guide, as that would add meaning to his expectations and training. It was all because she reminded him so much of Seo Hyun, bringing up old feelings and memories of the past. Then he thought that perhaps he shouldn't have expected anything at all, because if she really was a conductor, the stabilization from her would simply not have been enough for him. He considered himself shameless for his thoughts, But the next day, Irina already appeared on the training ground, as if everything was predetermined. With her were the Duke, her brother, and her father, whom he had asked to gather specially during the training so that everything would go smoothly. All this happened because of his desire to introduce Irina to the guests, almost as an unexpected but important visit for them. He intended to introduce the Duke and Lord Leopard so that everyone could see them in person and appreciate the significance of what was happening. The guards were in complete shock when they saw the Duke with their own eyes, not expecting such a meeting and such a strong presence. They couldn't believe that right now, standing before them was the famous Duke Leopard, who seemed like an almost mythical figure. He was considered not only as handsome as Molotov, but also a powerful esper, making him an almost unattainable ideal. Many thought it was unfair, but Irina just looked at him and remained calm, not showing any emotion. Everyone's first reaction to seeing Ciel was always the same, a mixture of admiration, surprise, and a slight trepidation at his strength. And this was understandable, because Irina also fell in love with him at first sight, feeling an attraction that was difficult to ignore. Ciel looked a little younger than expected, his face resembling the image he had seen before, and the master asked the Duke to say a few words. The Duke walked closer to the guards, assessing their posture and uniform, in order to discuss some issues with them and understand the level of their training. He said that he was releasing some of the guards and noted that they lacked people for formal formations, but their skills were known far beyond the borders of the Empire. Just by looking into their eyes, the Duke could already feel the impressive energy they emitted and appreciate their strength without further ado. He immediately understood why the Baron was proud of his knights, because each of them looked ready for serious trials and a real battle. Suddenly, one of the knights dared to address the master, demonstrating respect, but at the same time wanting to express his request directly. He said that with all due respect, he would like to make a special request, hoping for the Duke's favor and understanding of his position. The Duke nodded, confirming that he was ready to listen, and made it clear that the request could be voiced without fear or formality. The boy explained that they lived on the outskirts of the Empire, but even to their edge, rumors had reached not only about the Duke's talents as an esper, but also about his skill with a sword. He added that while the Duke was here, they asked to have a training sword fight with them to test their strength and gain experience from the master. The knights were very insistent on this, realizing that they might never have such an opportunity again, and they sincerely wanted to fight him. Then the Baron approached the gentleman and apologized for the insolence of his words, showing respect and correctness in front of the Duke and the guards. The Duke smiled and said that everything was fine. He himself was curious to know the level of training of these guards and test their skills. He grabbed the sword, feeling its weight and balance, and added that he would be interested to see how strong the guards he had heard so much about were. He took out the sword, gripping the hilt tightly, and was ready to stand next to them, feeling the tension in the air growing, and every moment could be decisive. They, sincerely grateful for the support, also took out their swords, preparing for a possible battle, their eyes shining with determination and inner excitement. Meanwhile, Aiden stood to the side, arms folded across his chest, watching what was happening, trying to stay out of it, but internally feeling the full weight of the moment. It was hard for him to be here, because he could not help but hear the thoughts of everyone around him, and this placed a special responsibility and stress on him. Suddenly, Irina approached him, and Aiden, not expecting this, raised his head in surprise, his gaze meeting her calm but confident position. She invited him to watch what was happening together, as if inviting him to share this moment with her and take a little break from the internal noise. He felt embarrassed. His cheeks turned red. But despite this, he agreed, realizing that he could not refuse such an offer. Aiden was very embarrassed and noticeably flushed, every gesture of his betrayed awkwardness, but at the same time an internal readiness to accept what was happening. Irina, seeing this, involuntarily smiled, slightly imbued with sympathy for him. Although her smile was soft and barely noticeable, almost like a quiet light in the twilight. Compared to Ciel, Aiden seemed especially cute. His shyness and sincerity gave the impression of purity, which made him especially touching. The Duke easily blocked the guard's blows, moving with such grace and confidence that every gesture he made seemed carefully thought out and almost artistic. He fought back quickly and without apparent effort, demonstrating a skill that amazed all who watched and made them rethink their expectations. The guards, of course, were shocked, not understanding how one person could so deftly and confidently repel their attacks, and this knocked them out of their usual rhythm. They did not expect such strength and speed from the master, and every blow, every movement of the Duke seemed almost supernatural to them. Everyone around was amazed when the Duke threw aside the first fighter with such ease that it seemed as if he was not a man, but an element in human form. They thought it was simply incredible, seeing how the Duke parried the blows with one hand, and began to whisper that such skill could not be imagined even in the wildest fantasies. David himself felt embarrassed and excited as he watched this. His heart beat faster, and he realized how amazing and unusual this spectacle was. He walked slowly towards the Duke, feeling his heart speed up with excitement and the weight of the moment, preparing for the test ahead. He expressed determination and respect, stating that he considered it an honor to engage in battle with him, feeling both fear and pride. The Duke nodded, indicating for David to come as soon as he was ready, as if sensing the student's inner confidence and readiness. David was amazed to see how quickly the Duke took the correct stance. His movements were precise and polished, causing a mixture of surprise and admiration. Suddenly, they heard a strange, incomprehensible sound that made them both tense up. Their hearts beat faster, and for a moment they were overcome with fear. Realizing the danger, it became clear to them that they needed to move out immediately, leaving hesitation and doubt behind in order to have time to prepare. Everyone immediately grabbed their swords, ready for battle, while the Duke was still trying to understand what kind of danger was approaching them so unexpectedly. David explained that the sound of the horn warns that monsters have been spotted in these places, and their appearance can be deadly. He called Irina and said that he would introduce her right away, reminding her that she must return home with the Lord to maintain safety. Irina and Aiden were amazed and shocked when they suddenly felt themselves lifted by the wind, as if the elements themselves had intervened in their fate. The Duke confidently noted that in such a wind, they would reach the estate much faster, as if he felt the advantages of an unusual route. Irina was stunned and did not have time to say anything as they quickly set off, leaving the dangerous place and feeling the unpredictability of what was happening. The Duke announced that he would take part in the extermination of monsters, demonstrating his willingness to engage in dangerous combat to protect his people. Versia was shocked, but deep down she was grateful to His Highness for his support and concern, feeling both surprise and gratitude. The Duke set off swiftly on the wind, as if the air itself helped him move with incredible speed, leaving behind only a trace of intense movement. A squad of orcs appeared on the horizon, ready to attack, their strength and determination felt in the air, causing alarm in everyone present. They were approaching fast, and if left unchecked, they would break through and reach the compound, so holding positions and waiting for reinforcements became critical. The Duke tried with all his might to hold the line, but his efforts seemed in vain. He shouted for no one to retreat, trying to inspire his subordinates, but the chaos around him only grew. Everyone present was at a loss, not understanding what was happening. The situation was unusual and frightening. None of them could predict the Duke's actions or the outcome of this strange battle. The Duke decided to rely on his unusual abilities. He gathered all his inner strength and prepared to act in such a way as to change the course of events instantly and decisively. Irina de Cloche concentrated at that moment, summoning the power of fire. Her intention was to burn all the opponents with one powerful blow, completely covering the space around them. The Duke used his ability to send all of the opponents into the magic wagon, rendering them unable to resist and stopping their progress. The orcs began to scream, but their cries were cut off immediately. The flames engulfed them completely, and they all burned in a matter of moments, leaving no trace of resistance. The guards were amazed to see how easily the Duke dealt with the crowd. They could not believe their own eyes, and were amazed at the strength he possessed. It seemed too simple for them. They realized that the Duke's actions were almost incredible, and the realization of this amazed their reason and sense of reality. The entire crowd was in raptures. Men and women felt a mixture of fear and admiration at the same time, watching how masterfully the Duke controlled the situation. The Duke remained calm and reserved. Not a single emotion betrayed his inner state, which impressed everyone around him even more. emphasizing his cold authority. The Baron and his son watched in admiration, amazed by the Duke's strength and determination, and feeling joy and satisfaction at how everything had turned out. The opponents were destroyed instantly, without having time to make a single blow. The Duke acted without hesitation, demonstrating impeccable precision and determination. The Baron felt genuine pleasure. He enjoyed watching the Duke's power completely neutralize the threat and eliminate all enemies without exception. The Duke's abilities seemed almost supernatural. Each of his actions was precise and powerful, causing everyone to admire and be amazed at the same time. It is obvious to everyone that he truly deserves the title of the best of the best. His skill and strength commanded respect and recognition without the slightest doubt, but after a while, the Duke began coughing up blood again. This sudden display of weakness was a reminder that even such a powerful man was not immune to the consequences. He realized that this was a side effect of using powers. Despite the incredible possibilities, each magical energy had its costs for the body. And it was happening at a very inopportune moment. The situation required complete control, and weakness could cost a lot, which added to the anxiety and tension. The Baron noticed this and said that the Duke could now descend, since the orc threat had been completely eliminated. Relative silence and order reigned around again. The Duke turned away, hiding his face as if he wanted to hide from others any emotions that were playing on it, and left those watching in bewilderment. He could not understand the reason for the Duke's sudden departure, feeling in it a sharp contrast between the past calm and the current haste. He tried to call out to His Highness, hoping for an answer, but the Duke seemed to disappear into thin air, not responding to either words or pleas. Seeing no other way out, he quickly left the place where he was, and soon found himself on the ground among high, fog-shrouded mountains. He lay on the cold ground, cringing from the pain that shot through his body, making him feel how strong it was every time. The cough continued to tear at him, and his body was arched in excruciating pain, leaving no opportunity to concentrate on anything else. This time, the side effects were much stronger than he had ever experienced, as if his body was protesting against everything that was happening. It was incredibly difficult to cope with. He felt his strength gradually leaving him, leaving only exhaustion and fear. He urgently needed a guide, and with this thought, he let his eyes drop limply, allowing himself to be immersed in darkness for a moment. Meanwhile, Irina and Aiden continued running, trying to leave the dangerous place as quickly as possible, feeling that every second counted. Irina was forced to stop, as fatigue and the weight of what was happening weighed on her, not allowing her to move further at the same speed. She emanated an unusual aura that could be felt even from a distance, reflecting tension and inner strength. She realized that it had happened by accident. Her emotions, not being contained, had burst out, affecting those around her. Having let her guard down after returning home, Irina sat up, and the guide finally released himself, allowing her to recover a little. She turned to the Lord, carefully checking if everything was okay with him, trying to hide her excitement and concern. The Lord was clearly embarrassed, but tried to convince her that he was okay, although it was clear from his eyes that fear was still present. After that, someone called her, breaking the tense silence, and Irina's attention moved to the new sound, expecting to see a familiar face. It was a maid, and her joy was evident in everything. She was clearly happy to see the lady home again, full of excitement and relief. She also said that she was very worried about them and wanted their safety to be monitored, especially closely, conveying her concerns with care and concern. Irina noted that Mary was just in time, because she was going to the mountain that towered over their estate, and that was why she wanted to show the Lord his chambers. The maid assured that she had fulfilled the request, and added that the master should follow her, so that everything would go without hitches and misunderstandings. Meanwhile, Irina turned around and began to carefully move away, listening to the sounds around her and checking that no one noticed her movement. But she turned back abruptly when she felt someone grab her hand tightly, causing her heart to beat faster in surprise. She was surprised to see that it was Aiden, who suddenly took the initiative and stopped her, as if trying to keep her from doing something important. Irina couldn't understand why he did this. Her thoughts were racing, and she was trying to make sense of his sudden behavior. The guy admitted that he himself did not understand why she was heading towards the mountain, as if anxiety and concern were mixed in his words. Irina explained that she simply needed to check how the recent battle with the monsters had gone to ensure the safety of the estate and the people. He insisted that it was extremely dangerous and that she should not go there alone, demonstrating serious concern for her safety. The lady assured him that everything would be fine. She would watch from afar, and insisted that he let go of her hand, keeping his distance. Then Aiden immediately apologized, and Irina was surprised by his abrupt behavior, but realized that he did not seem to want to take a step back from her. She said that she would then leave him behind and calmly went forward so as not to delay events, controlling her emotions. Irina mounted her horse to speed up the journey, realizing that this would allow her to get to the right place faster and save energy. She confidently controlled the animal, perfectly sensing its movements and direction, thanks to her riding experience and long practice. Soon she came to the edge of the cliff, stopping to look around and assess the distance to the summit, holding her breath before continuing on her journey. Irina felt a sense of unease as her gaze touched this area, as if the air itself was warning her of impending danger and hidden traces of a recent battle. Among the smoke, she noticed a strange green tint and immediately realized that these were traces of the burning bodies of the orcs, whose smell and decay filled the space around. The conclusion was obvious. The monsters that had recently fought here were orcs, leaving behind chaos and destruction. But if the bodies were already burned, it meant that the battle had long since ended and no one was currently fighting, leaving a strange feeling of silence and emptiness. The battle's quick end suggested that the Duke had somehow aided these orcs, or at least influenced the outcome of the battle with his presence. The situation seemed almost a blessing. Monsters appeared and disappeared while the Duke was nearby, as if his power regulated the balance of events. Irina felt that it was time to return home, because there was no longer any threat, and this place was now safe, although anxiety still clung to her thoughts. But suddenly, her attention was caught by a movement to the side, and her heart sank. Something was wrong, which made her freeze in place, ready for the unexpected. Before her lay the Duke, motionless, near a tree, as if his strength had gone, and this sight caused Irina deep fear for his life. He was folded in a strange position, his arms crossed over his chest, and blood was visible from his mouth, indicating a serious injury that did not allow one to remain indifferent. Without a second's hesitation, Irina rushed towards him, quickening her steps to provide assistance and somehow protect the one who had always been her support. She tried to understand what had happened to him, looking at his face and wounds, trying to find even the slightest sign of consciousness or reaction. But the Duke showed no signs of life at first. His body remained motionless, as if time around him had frozen in anticipation. Irina assumed that he had lost consciousness, and her anxiety increased, because his condition seemed extremely dangerous and required immediate assistance. She was tormented by questions about why he was here, in this open territory, without protection or security, as if he had risked his life for no apparent reason. Things became increasingly strange when his aura appeared around Irina, a bright light radiating with power that she couldn't explain given his unconscious state. He was unconscious, and Irina didn't understand where this energy that surrounded him came from, as if the very essence of the Duke did not want to leave him weak and vulnerable. The fact that Ciel was using his powers while unconscious showed that he was having a serious attack, caused by the side effects of the magic he was using. Right now, the Duke desperately needed a guide whose aura could support him in this critical situation, when his strength was almost completely gone. Irina watched him, feeling how incredibly hard it was for him, and understood that without her intervention, the situation could get out of control at any second. But the fire was spreading at an incredible speed, and at this rate the flames would engulf the entire mountain, destroying everything in its path if it were not stopped immediately. Realizing this, Irina concentrated and tried to call for rain, using her abilities to at least slightly weaken the destructive power of the elements and protect the surrounding area. However, the flames spread even faster than expected, burning everything around, as if resisting her attempts to interfere and giving no chance for respite. She immediately realized that the attack was too strong to be dealt with using only the guide's aura, and that she would have to move on to more direct methods of stabilization. Deciding to take action, Irina made the decision to use contact stabilization, realizing that this was the only way to restore his balance and ease his suffering. She approached him carefully, placing her palm against his body, and began the stabilization process, combining her powers with his aura to gradually quell the attack. Their auras merged into one, and gradually he felt better. The tension began to subside, and his body and spirit received the support that was sorely needed at that moment. Irina even noticed how his expression changed. He stopped straining so much, and his breathing became even, which was a clear sign of regaining control. The flames that had previously threatened everything around them finally began to die down, and the fire stopped spreading too quickly, as if nature itself was submitting to their combined efforts. It was all over, and Irina sighed with relief, feeling that the danger had passed, and was ready to step away to give him some space and fully recover. But suddenly, she felt someone grab her arm. It was unexpected and caused a strong surge of fear, because she did not expect such an intrusion. Her heart began to beat wildly. Fear filled her, since no one could predict the Duke's behavior at this moment, and she felt that control over the situation was slipping away. He pulled her close to him, almost holding her by force, and dragged her to the ground, as if trying to protect her and at the same time regain his stability after a severe attack. He regained consciousness, and now Irina understood that her contact with him helped not only stabilize his body, but also restore clarity of thought, allowing the Duke to fully understand what was happening. Irina heard him say that it was not enough, and her heart sank with incomprehension. Everything around her seemed strange, as if time had slowed down, and she could not predict his actions. She didn't understand what was happening when he suddenly moved closer and kissed her on the lips. Her body tensed in surprise, and her mind tried to comprehend the situation. He continued to kiss her, but Irina jumped back sharply, trying to pull away and regain control of the moment, her thoughts spinning with shock and confusion. She tried desperately to understand his behavior, but he grabbed her again, as if not noticing her resistance, and this only increased her internal tension and fear. He grabbed her hand, pressing himself on top of her, and Irina couldn't comprehend what was happening, feeling a strange mixture of fear and confusion, as if her body wasn't obeying her. She tried to make sense of what was happening, asking him to at least let her go first, trying to regain some space and control over the situation. He was about to kiss her again, but she began to scream and resist, demanding that he stop, her voice bursting out, reflecting all the horror and incomprehension of what was happening. Irina couldn't understand what exactly was happening. Every moment was filled with confusion. Her mind was struggling with her feelings and unexpected actions from Ciel. Ciel finally said that he was wrong, and those words calmed her inner storm a little, although confusion and anxiety still remained in her mind. After these words, he fell silent and collapsed on top of her, leaving Irina at a loss, her body tensed from not understanding what was happening and how to react. She couldn't comprehend his actions and felt the weight of what was happening, as if her strength was gradually leaving her, and every breath was difficult. The other Ciel also had a habit of mumbling unintelligible things during his stabilization fits, and now Irina realized that the situation was repeating itself with him, which only added to the confusion. She never expected this Ciel to have such a strange habit, and her mind tried to piece together the pieces of what was happening, not knowing how to react. The main issue now was about her injured lip, which she didn't know what to do with. Every touch caused pain and reminded her of what had happened. She knew her family would definitely ask what had happened, and thinking about the consequences only increased her anxiety and confusion, creating a feeling of pressure from all sides. The Baron tried to call out to His Highness, hoping for a reaction so that Ciel would come to his senses. His voice trembled, and his heart sank with tension and anticipation. The Duke finally stood up, and those watching noticed that he seemed to be okay, although the Duke himself was surprised that Ciel had been unconscious and had now come to his senses. He couldn't understand what exactly was happening to him. A feeling of freshness and strength was taking hold of him, as if someone had deliberately stabilized his body and spirit. The Baron said that the Duke was in a deep sleep. It all seemed incredibly tiring. So unusual were the abilities that had to be used, as if every thought and movement took strength beyond measure. He wondered if he was the first to discover the Duke, and the Baron actually confirmed this, as if to hint that his guesses were correct, but only partially. The servants were often in this place, but none of them would leave the Duke unattended if they noticed him sleeping, because caring for their master was a law for them. Sometimes it seemed to him that the Baron's statement was true, and that no one had really found him before, as if fate itself had pointed out his discovery. There was a deep meaning in the Baron's words, but there was still a doubt. Someone had definitely stabilized the Duke while he was unconscious, leaving the mystery beyond comprehension. His thoughts involuntarily turned to Saint Soyeon, and he had a hunch that she could be the one to help, giving him the necessary support and strength, even though it seemed unlikely. But he understood that this was practically impossible. Sohyun had not yet begun to independently explore the world, and her powers could not fully manifest at this moment. This feeling of freshness and purity was incredibly similar to the stabilization that Seohyun usually gave, creating the impression that her presence was still somewhere nearby, invisible. The Duke asked his lordship if they should return, as if seeking confirmation of the decision in order to act together and not leave the situation unattended. He agreed, confirming that this was indeed a wise decision, and the Duke set off with him, moving forward together, as if united by a common goal. Seal spent the entire journey wondering who had actually stabilized the Duke, and he couldn't even begin to imagine what kind of force or person could have provided such assistance. He became curious about who among the people was able to achieve the same stabilization as his wife, and this thought did not leave him, causing slight anxiety and interest at the same time. After these thoughts, he headed to his room, feeling a slight tension, but also a curiosity that did not give him peace, as if he was looking for answers to his questions. Aiden felt joy when he finally saw his brother. His heart filled with warmth, and a slight smile appeared on his face, reflecting true satisfaction from the meeting. Seal said that he was just looking for his brother, and he wanted to discuss with him issues concerning Lady Irina, her behavior, and possible unusual abilities. He admitted that he thought she might be an esper, and this statement sounded serious, causing Ciel to be instantly interested and slightly puzzled at the same time. The Duke was shocked by what he heard. His younger brother's words had hurt him, and he tried to understand what exactly Aiden meant and how important it was. He asked again, trying to understand more precisely what his brother was talking about, and the desire to understand his thoughts became obvious in every movement and look of the Duke. Aiden recalled that he had once asked to read the lady's mind, and this promise had haunted him, forcing him to return again to past attempts and observations. Ever since they arrived here, he had been trying to fathom her thoughts, but he had been unable to accurately calculate either her thoughts or his older brother's inner feelings, which had caused him a little frustration. And today, when they landed in front of the mansion, it looked like she was somehow using an unusual ability that was immediately noticeable. Her actions seemed unusual, as if she was using internal powers that could influence the surroundings, and both brothers noticed this, feeling a subtle change in the atmosphere. It might have been an esper ability. Aiden couldn't say for sure, but all signs pointed to her abilities being beyond the ordinary. Seal decided to find out what type of ability she used, and Aiden admitted that he was not sure, although the moment of its use left a strong impression. He said that at that moment he felt extremely strange, as if the internal tension had disappeared, and his soul felt unusually light, as if something had freed his thoughts. These sensations made his inner state unusually calm. The heaviness disappeared, and his thoughts seemed to calm down by themselves, leaving lightness and clarity. Then Ciel seriously thought, perhaps she was able to calm the minds of others, even the minds of espers, and this idea gradually strengthened in his mind, causing respect and surprise at the same time. He understood that the powers manifested before him were not the abilities of an esper at all, but typical manifestations of a conductor, which were distinguished by their subtle and unusual nature, almost invisible to outsiders. He guessed that Lady Irene de Cloche was indeed a guide, and he felt this especially clearly when he held hands with her. The sensation was unusually strong and almost magical. Yesterday, when they simply shook hands in a modest and poor hall, he did not experience such acute sensations as now, when the contact was more personal and close, almost intimate. Duke Leopard watched Aiden closely and asked him if he had held Irina's hand and why that particular moment had caused him strong emotions, not allowing him to hide his surprise. Aiden honestly admitted that he himself did not understand why Ciel's gaze was so special, why the Duke looked at him with such attention, as if seeing something very important. After these thoughts, Ciel calmed down, regaining his sanity, and felt the need to apologize for his previous behavior, realizing that fatigue and emotions played a cruel joke. He said he was simply incredibly exhausted, that the fatigue had upset his internal balance and made him overreact to what was happening, preventing him from thinking clearly. He couldn't understand what this feeling was, why he was so upset by Aiden holding Irina's hand, and why this simple action caused a storm of emotions and anxiety inside him. However, he decided to ask his younger brother why he had taken Irina's hand, and Aiden explained that he had accidentally grabbed her when she was about to go up the mountain alone to stop her. Aiden suddenly realized that he did not want to let Irina go. He felt an inner attachment and fear of separation, which became an unexpected but strong signal of his true feelings for her. So he grabbed her hand tightly and then asked if she was really heading to the mountain to make sure her safety was under control and to show his concern. Aiden added that he had personally seen her set out on her journey, and this confirmed his actions and sense of responsibility for her safety, making contact with her almost a necessity. Now everything became clear. The person who stabilized his internal state and calmed his emotions was definitely Lady Irina, and there was no doubt about it, despite the confusion. Perhaps it seemed like complete stupidity, an inexplicable coincidence, or a strange influence of feelings, but logic and heart insisted that there was nothing accidental here. If only God would take pity on him and give him clarity of thought, allow him to accept and understand these events without doubts and internal contradictions, and ease his soul. Then he brought Sohyun back, but this time as Irina, realizing that the past, sacrifices, and rebirth were reflected in the current reality, and now she was before him in all her integrity. It would dispel all the doubts he had about Lady Irina, allowing him to finally understand the true motives and actions that had previously seemed incomprehensible. All the details and events would fit together into a single coherent puzzle, in which each fragment had its place and explanation, leaving a feeling of complete clarity. He felt deep gratitude to his younger brother for the revelation, and also for the offer to meet again for breakfast in the dining room to discuss the details in person. After these thoughts, he headed to his room, feeling a slight tension, but at the same time calm, as if many questions had been answered. The only thing he could be sure of at the moment was that he now had at least a reference point to rely on in order to understand further events. He clearly understood that it was Sohyun's conductor abilities that played a key role in stabilizing the situation, and this inspired a sense of confidence and control. He firmly decided that he would definitely find out all the details about what was happening while the others were sleeping, in order to act without unnecessary risk and surprises. In the evening, Irina had already sent for food, breathing a sigh of relief, realizing that now she could relax a little after a stressful day and her own thoughts. She couldn't even allow herself to have breakfast with Ciel's family, feeling like she needed to stay away and think about everything that was happening alone. She finished her meal in her room, alone, allowing herself some peace that she so lacked in the company of her family and prying eyes. She tried not to show her bitten lip to her family, but her thoughts were constantly filled with worry for Ciel, and the understanding that it was the light and the abilities of the conductor that would stabilize his condition. He was in a terrible state when Irina saw him on the mountain, as if he had not received the necessary stabilization for a long time, which caused anxiety and a desire to help immediately. According to the original story, Ciel and the Crown Prince's stabilization occurred immediately after the dimension transfer, which Irina remembered and used in her reflections on the present. Irina instantly realized this after awakening as a guide, realizing that now her knowledge and abilities allow her to influence the course of events and help those in need. Events definitely unfolded differently than in the original story, and this gave her a sense of responsibility for her every action and the possible consequences. However, if he had not come here, many things simply would not have happened, and it was his presence that became the catalyst for the development of current events. He had not changed at all. He remained just as complex and unpredictable, requiring Irina's constant attention and caution in her actions. He always made her life difficult, creating situations where every step required thought, planning, and inner fortitude, forcing her to grow and adapt. Irina Decloche was so furious that it seemed like every single thing in the room was a target for her, and she would smash everything around her without thinking, releasing the pent-up tension. After this outburst of emotion, her body seemed to lighten the load, and she was able to easily take a deep breath, feeling a temporary calm and a small respite. In her past life as So-hyun, she had attained the rank of 9th Dan and held a black belt in Taekwondo, making her incredibly strong and disciplined, physically and mentally. To be honest, back then, her mind was blinded by her love for Ciel, and even the strict and sometimes annoying traits of his character seemed charming. But now those memories were perceived completely differently. Her ex-husband, Duke Leopard, had an arrogant and fastidious character who constantly demanded attention and obedience from those around him, which tired Irina and caused internal resistance. The most incomprehensible thing for her was why he constantly demanded that she stay at home, as if her freedom and personal time were something unacceptable to him, and this irritated her tormentingly. Every time he returned, she was obliged to be at home, subject to his whims, and any attempt to leave turned into a source of conflict and tension, which she felt with all her soul. If for some reason Irina was not at home, the Duke would start calling again and again, not leaving her the slightest opportunity to rest until he got an answer and found out where she was. He kept calling and asking about her whereabouts, with a persistence and control that unnerved her, but also kept her in a state of anxious anticipation, as if she were part of a game. In this way, he was able to find out exactly where she was and would come for her, leaving no room for personal freedom or choice, which further depressed her spirit. He literally dragged her home, using his power and influence, forcing her to obey, and Irina felt both angry and helpless, but she could no longer escape this control. The most surprising and even absurd thing about this situation was that after all this, he did not show the slightest attention to her experiences, as if her presence in the house was natural and unnoticeable. He hardly noticed her when she was at home, completely immersed in his own affairs, which made their time together strangely cold and distant, despite their previous closeness. Ciel continued to go about his usual business, ignoring her emotional state and internal conflicts, which made Irina feel invisible and unsupported around him. The Duke never explained how he met So-hyun or the other espers, or why he felt the need to control who she saw, leaving Irina in a constant state of confusion and bewilderment. Despite all these complex and contradictory thoughts, Irina could not force herself to leave him, as if an invisible force was holding her close, despite the pain and disappointment. Honestly, she still doesn't understand what it was about him that made her sacrifice her own life for him, giving everything for someone who seemed to not notice her soul. This incomprehensible attachment and the feeling of a long internal debt remained with her, and even after a time, when her consciousness was reborn into a novel, the memories of her past life still pulled her back. After a long day, Irina Decloche settled into bed, trying to relax and fall into a long-awaited sleep, finally allowing herself to rest. Her eyes slowly closed, her breathing became even, and after a few minutes, she had already plunged into a deep and sweet sleep, forgetting about everything in the world. Suddenly, a quiet creaking sound woke her up. The window of her room opened, and Duke Leopard entered the room silently, sliding across the floor like a shadow. Irina instantly woke up, her consciousness tensed. Her heart began to beat faster. She felt that someone strange and dangerous had appeared in the room. She immediately realized that someone had entered her room in the middle of the night, disturbing the peace and sense of security, and this made her tense. She felt a foreign presence approaching, the tension growing, as if the room itself was warning her of impending danger. Remembering the past, when she lost the only person close to her, Irina felt a familiar anxiety, the fear that someone had penetrated her personal space. But unlike that past, the invasion was now happening through a window rather than a door, and this heightened her sense of vulnerability. She quietly took out a small pistol hidden under her pillow, preparing to defend herself, since her intuition told her that she would have to act immediately. Once upon a time, Irina was just beginning to trust her family. She stole a small weapon under her pillow from her brother's room, and now it became her only defense. Normally, she would never have thought to use it. The gun was more of a good luck charm than an actual weapon, but the situation called for drastic measures. She was already holding it in her hands, listening carefully to the steps that were getting closer and closer, feeling the adrenaline filling her body. Irina realized that there was no time to put it off. The moment for action had come, and her safety at this moment depended on her determination. She spun around, attempting to strike Duke Lepart, though the darkness hid his silhouette and every movement was sharp. The darkness in the room prevented her from seeing who was in front of her. The face remained hidden, and every sound seemed threatening, increasing the fear and tension. She pointed the gun straight at him, trying not to give the enemy the slightest chance to get closer, focusing on the only goal: to protect herself. But at that moment, he grabbed her hand, and her body tensed from the unexpected contact. Her heart sank, and her mind searched for a way out of the current situation. Fear took over her completely. She didn't expect that he would be able to intercept her movement, and anxiety mixed with panic, leaving a feeling of helplessness. She screamed, demanding to be released, feeling the tension reach its limit, every second becoming a fight for control and safety. She heard her old name, Seo-hyun, and immediately realized that all this was connected to her past life, which she thought she had left behind forever in Korea. Irina de Cloche could not believe her ears, realizing that what had just been said had completely turned her understanding of what was happening upside down. Duke Leopard noticed that she seemed to think that he would not know about her past identity, about the stabilization associated with her former name. Irina was confused. She did not understand why he was in her room and what exactly he was looking for here, disrupting the usual order. Like a bolt of lightning, he said Seo-hyun's name again, and the name echoed in her mind, causing a mixed feeling of fear and surprise. The Duke asked why she had not told him this before, since the evidence of who she really was so obvious that he could not help but notice. Suddenly, he felt an aura emanating from her, subtle and strong at the same time, as if the past and present were intertwined in her presence. He also felt the stabilization that came from Irina, and this gave him an unusual feeling of pleasure and satisfaction from the unexpected meeting. Irina, without meaning to, accidentally stabilized him, as if her energy and the past merged in one moment, causing them both to feel an unusual connection. In a rush of emotion, he suddenly pressed her to himself, as if trying to hold on to the moment and not let it disappear into the emptiness that surrounded them both. He said that he had been looking everywhere for his sweet wife, the one who had once been by his side and left an indelible mark on his heart. Irina did not understand how he was able to recognize her, how the past manifested itself so vividly in the present, causing mixed feelings of anxiety and nostalgia. She pushed him away, not believing her eyes, trying to comprehend that it was really Ciel who was now standing in front of her in this new world. Irina ran to the corner of the room, trying to create distance and hide from the unexpected and strange presence of the Duke, who suddenly entered her life. She tried to explain to herself and to him that she didn't understand what he was talking about, and that all this seemed to her like part of an alien world for which she was not ready. Irina wasn't sure if the man in front of her was really the Ciel she knew, because the past and present were intertwined in an incredible combination. The Duke stood there, unsure of how to react, his inner feelings and memories clashing with her distrust and fear, creating a tense pause. He sighed, smiling a tiny smile, as if trying to convey through it a sense of ease and understanding, despite the strangeness of the moment. He thought she must be in shock, because it was already deep night outside, and the whole world seemed motionless, as if frozen in anticipation of their reaction. The Duke apologized for the suddenness, realizing how surprised and confused she was, and subtly hinted that her feelings and reactions were entirely justified in this strange situation. But the stabilization she gave him, like an invisible thread, made him feel an acute lack of her presence and miss her more than he ever expected. She watched him and tried to understand what was driving his actions, but she could not figure out why he was suddenly approaching her so persistently. He came closer to her, pressed her against the cold wall, and there was determination in his gaze, as if he wanted to say that she was not going anywhere and should stay close. His intention was clear. He wanted her to stay with him so that all their past and feelings could be reunited, despite all the complexity of their relationship. She understood that now he had changed, that the person who had once been the same no longer existed. And there was something disturbing and new about this at the same time. Irina tried to understand his motives, wondering why he was looking at her like that, because she was sure that his heart belonged to Soyeon, and this was her secret pain. He moved even closer, his eyes shining with emotion, and told her that he missed her more than she could have imagined, and she barely knew how to respond, feeling strangely confused. Thoughts were battling inside her. Should she admit that it was she and open her heart to him, or continue to deny everything, keeping her distance so as not to lose control? She firmly stated that she had already told him about her uncertainty, that she was not someone he could know, and that she was not ready to open up completely in this difficult situation. His presence began to irritate her, while fulfilling one of her old desires, but she couldn't understand why he appeared out of nowhere and destroyed the peace of her world. Irina told him her name, confidently and calmly, to put a clear line between herself and the one he might be looking for. She was Irina de Cloche. She explained that she was the first and only daughter of the Cloche family, the heir to a lineage whose will and decisions were of particular importance and could not be ignored. Based on this, she asked him to leave the room, warning that if necessary, she would contact her father to protect her personal space and safety. Irina added that if he dared to return to her room without permission, the consequences would be serious and inevitable, regardless of his title or position. She stressed that even if he is a 3-time duke, she is ready to use all possible measures to protect her borders and show the seriousness of her intentions. He took a step back, a little embarrassed, and admitted that he might have been wrong to try to invade her space and force her to react to her emotions. He bowed and quietly apologized, then left the room, feeling it was best to leave to give Irina some space and time. Irina was finally able to breathe out with relief, as if a weight had fallen from her shoulders, and her chest felt lighter, although her thoughts were still confused. She sank into a chair, trying to compose herself, but anxiety still slid across her consciousness, making her heart beat faster from worry. She didn't deny that a small spark of joy ran through her when she realized that the Ciel of this world remembered her past, who she used to be. However, this was the only feeling she had for him. Nothing more, no love, no affection, just a quiet memory. Irina couldn't understand why Ciel suddenly started to show obsession, although there was almost no chance that he would be able to control her again. Meanwhile, Ciel, sensing his presence through his aura, returned to his room. His steps were quiet, but his mind was immersed in thought. On the way, he stopped in the garden, where a light breeze was rustling the leaves, and decided to devote time to his thoughts, trying to understand what had happened. He thought deeply about the events that had just unfolded, and how Irina had quietly but firmly expressed her attitude towards him. Irina's words about her not being the one he knew flashed through his mind again, making his heart clench with the realization of the differences between the past and the present. He realized that Seo-hyun would never reject him so abruptly and without hesitation, and this realization hit his self-confidence hard. He probably made a mistake, and everything that is happening now only makes sense in light of new circumstances that he has not yet fully comprehended. Seal clutched his head with his hands, his fingers digging into his hair, a feeling of confusion and inner tension filling him like a storm inside. His gaze accidentally fell on his hand, and he saw the cut left by Irina, reminding him that the events had physical consequences and were extremely stressful. He knew it was because she was waving the weapon around, trying to defend herself, and her actions were completely justified. However, it became a kind of stabilization for him, proving the reality of what had happened and her determination, which could not be ignored. The cut on his hand was clear evidence that Lady Irina and Seo-hyun were the same person, and it gave him no peace, but it gave him clarity. He could not understand at all why she was rejecting him, because all the signs indicated that there must be something more between them than just acquaintance. Several days passed, and life began to return to normal, but thoughts about what had happened still haunted him, not allowing him to forget the events. They dined together again, but the atmosphere was different, attentive, reserved, and each person chose their words and gestures carefully, trying not to upset the delicate balance. The Duke watched Irina closely, his eyes never leaving her, as if he was trying to read her every thought and understand her intentions, which made the atmosphere around him tense. Irina constantly felt this intense gaze, felt how it seemed to hang over her, making her heart beat faster. Although outwardly, she tried to remain calm. The Duke was sad. He felt annoyance and slight pain from the fact that Irina did not accept his presence in any way, as if an invisible wall of misunderstanding had arisen between them. Irina, without hiding it, understood that the Duke was clearly watching her, and this knowledge simultaneously worried and irritated her, creating tension between them. From the moment Ciel appeared in the next room, he was constantly next to Irina, like a magnet, drawing his attention to her every move. The Duke followed her wherever she went, staying close by, watching her every step and every gesture, which was already beginning to tire and irritate her. His constant presence and intent gazes began to put pressure on Irina, causing her to feel inner fatigue and slight irritation, which she tried to hide. She announced that she had finished her business, but wished everyone a pleasant appetite, as if trying to restore calm to the situation and distance herself a little from the intrusive attention. After these words, Irina abruptly left, leaving everyone behind, in order to be alone and avoid unnecessary tension from the constant presence of the Duke. The Duke looked at her with a slight sadness and disappointment in his eyes, feeling that his attempts to be there were not finding a response and only creating tension. Mother noticed this. Her gaze caught everything: the Duke's sadness and Irina's slight irritation. Realizing that there was an unspoken tension between them, she changed her clothes in preparation for a horse ride, deciding to spend some time in the fresh air and get a little distracted from the Duke's constant surveillance of her. As she walked down the stairs, Irina noticed that the Duke was already next to her again, as if he had not let her go for a minute and was accompanying her at every step. Of course, he was hovering around her again, demonstrating his attention and persistence, which had already become habitual, but still caused her internal tension. He expressed his desire to help if she was going to go on the ride, offering his support and concern, as if not understanding her reluctance to be led. Irina firmly stated that her help was not needed, emphasizing her independence and desire to cope without outside help. She again indicated that she intended to go for a ride, showing her determination and willingness to enjoy the ride on her own, despite the Duke's insistence. Irina de Cloche was forced to return, despite the weight of her thoughts, because the gloomy atmosphere seemed to reflect her inner state, forcing her to stop and look at what was happening from a different angle. She quietly asked him for forgiveness for the past, and, without stopping, turned to leave, feeling a slight tension and a strange anxiety inside, as if the past was still holding her by the shoulder. He called her Seo-hyun one last time, using the name from her past life, and it sounded both familiar and foreign, bringing back memories she had tried to forget, but they came flooding back. He added that he would not take up much of her time. His words were brief but filled with a sincere desire to explain, as if every moment was valuable and could change a lot. The reason he wanted to talk to her was clear. Inside him, there was a burning desire to understand, to hear, and perhaps to receive answers that had previously seemed unattainable, and this was what made him insist on meeting. Irina turned to meet his gaze, and her eyes expressed surprise mixed with caution. She felt a strange combination of familiarity and newness that did not allow her to simply pass by. In the past, she couldn't drive him away. Her emotions were always too strong, but now, finding herself in a new world, she was surprised that she didn't feel any of the previous excitement, although the memory of the past lived inside. Perhaps it was because she now had a family that loved her for who she was now, not for her past roles. Love and support gave her the strength to be herself, not a prisoner of other people's expectations. Her family taught her to value herself and recognize her own uniqueness, explaining that she was a special person whose abilities and character deserved respect and independent choice, and not subordination to the desires of others. In her past life, she did everything for him, giving herself completely, as if dissolving in other people's needs, and this often left her without her own life, turning her into a dead end, without the right to personal feelings and freedom. She warned that if he continued to act so indifferently and persistently, it would force him to choose between his desire to control the situation and respect for his own family and past, which could have consequences. He will be in a position where decisions will depend not only on him, but also on his parents, as well as on the events of the previous night, which will be impossible to ignore. The consequences will be inevitable if he does not change his behavior. After all was said, Irina said goodbye, turned around, and began to walk away, feeling like she had done everything she could to protect herself and her new life, leaving behind a past that no longer had power over her. He couldn't understand why Irina was moving away, as if an invisible wall had appeared between them, and every step he took seemed like a mistake, causing confusion and dismay in him. A raven suddenly appeared from behind, confident that its purpose was to accompany the creature on a walk, following the familiar shadow and listening to every movement. The Duke noticed that he and the Baron had not crossed paths for a long time, and this realization added a strange tension to the air, as if past meetings had left an invisible mark. The Baron explained that such events often happened at his home because the night watch required constant presence, and the Duke did not expect the Baron to become so diligent. Baron emphasized that all guards perform the same duties without distinction of rank, and this order creates a sense of stability and predictability in their work. This strict discipline looked great and was at the same time an effective method of transmitting knowledge and skills, allowing new recruits to quickly learn the rules of the service. Raven added that the monster appears suddenly, without a schedule, so he teaches newcomers to distinguish subtle sensations, from the sway of the wind to the tremors in the ground, developing their senses. The Duke admitted that it was a brilliant idea and decided that she had to implement similar training for her knights when she returned so that they too could develop mindfulness. By the way, the Baron felt confident because a week had already passed since the Duke's arrival, and everything in their interaction began to acquire familiar forms and rhythms. He asked if the Duke could show Lord Aiden all their sights, and the Duke immediately caught the intention and agreed, understanding the importance of this meeting. He politely asked for the unwanted information to be removed, displaying a subtlety in his approach that was consistent with his habit of remaining diplomatic and correct. He had already forgotten that he had used Aiden as an excuse to be here, and the realization left him slightly confused, leaving him feeling guilty and in need of reconsideration. He explained that he was visiting the corners of the Empire with his brother, showing him the surroundings, revealing the beauty and richness of the places that their native land cherished. However, the words spoken to the Baron initially left his mind as soon as he realized that Irina was his wife, and all previous doubts dissolved in this discovery. He stood up, realizing that it was impossible to leave now, because he had not yet managed to show his brother everything he had planned, and this remained important to him. So he stayed at home, ready to spend some more time here, thinking through every next step of his stay and observing the situation. Later, he asked if there were any obstacles to this, and the Baron, holding back a smile, replied that he had no objections, but only wished him to stay without unnecessary complications. However, his wife clearly disagreed, and this was evident in her gaze and her gentle but assertive manner in which she kept the situation under control. The Duke understood everything at once, noticing the tone of her behavior on the very first day, which allowed him to assess who really controlled the atmosphere in the house. It seems that the real head of the family in the Cloche household was the Baroness, and it was her decisions that determined the order of things and the reaction of the household to outside interference. This meant that any permission or consent now had to be obtained only from her, bypassing formal protocols and contacting the Baroness directly. The Duke said he wanted to find out if the Baron would mind if he discussed the matter directly with the Baroness, showing respect for the hierarchy of the house. The gentleman immediately lit up with happiness. His face lit up with a smile when he realized that the Duke intended to act delicately and with respect for the family. He assured them that, of course, there were no objections, and that they were honored that the Duke wished to stay and continue exploring their fief, considering the situation to be beneficial to all. However, one could notice that the Baron was slightly worried, because he was not sure that he would be able to give the Duke a worthy reception due to the suddenness of the visit and the limited preparation possibilities. The situation was such that the visit was unexpected, and all the family's resources were used to avoid presenting the house in an awkward light in front of such an important guest. Frankly, the Baron was not in a position to dictate terms. His influence on the decision about the Duke's continued stay was limited by circumstances and the expectations of the family. Now that he was certain that Lady Irina was the reincarnated Seohyun, his attitude towards what was happening became more careful, considering her past and unique situation. The Baron was technically the Duke's father-in-law, which added a new complexity to their relationship, as the official connection now added to the mutual obligations and responsibilities. It was impossible to allow Irina to have only a bad impression of herself, because her image and actions always mattered to those around her. Duke Leopard noted that the Baroness could enjoy quiet conversations, while the guide spent his time in a surprisingly interesting and pleasant manner. Her ladyship displayed true politeness, and the wisdom she possessed helped her to behave correctly with people and deservedly command respect. Meanwhile, Irina, forgetting about the outside world, was collecting flowers, carefully choosing the brightest and most beautiful ones, immersing herself in the quiet peace of the garden. She went into the garden through the back door, preferring fresh air and freedom to the closed rooms where everything seemed too strict and boring. While thinking about when the Duke would leave, Irina suddenly heard a sharp cry of birds, which made her tense up and become alert. This cry was followed by a loud scream from the guy, and turning around, Irina saw Aiden, who had suddenly appeared in the backyard. She instantly understood what was happening, and surprise was mixed with slight alarm at the sight of his frightened face, which was completely unusual for Irina. Irina did not understand why he was here, in the middle of the garden, and why his reaction was so violent, completely inappropriate to the situation. She soon noticed the reason for his fear. A large bug was sitting on him, which explained his screaming and anxiety, which seemed excessive. Aiden screamed in fear, afraid of the insect, and this immediately became obvious to Irina, causing her to feel a mixture of sympathy and a slight smile. Understanding his fear, she quickly rushed to him, deciding to help and carefully remove the insect so that the guy would calm down and feel safe. Without a moment's hesitation, she moved towards him, fully focused on removing the source of his fear and alleviating his condition. Running closer, Irina deftly grabbed the bug and threw it away, freeing Aiden from unexpected and frightening contact with the insect. After that, she rushed to him, carefully watching his reaction and making sure that he was okay, checked if he was hurt or too scared. The guy was clearly scared when he noticed the lady, and Irina, noticing his anxiety, wanted to understand how he ended up so far away in the backyard of the garden. Aiden explained that he was looking for a secluded place, and Irina suggested that his fear of insects was stronger than his usual curiosity about the garden. He tried to insist that he was not afraid, but admitted that he had a strong aversion to insects, which added comicality and humanity to his behavior. Aiden asked her opinion about insects, but Irina calmly answered that for her, there was nothing more disgusting than real monsters, and she saw more danger in them than in small creatures. He was shocked to realize that Irina had seen the monsters with her own eyes, as if she had encountered them in real life, and not just heard stories. Irina had almost forgotten her past life, where she had seen them countless times. Now there was not a single one here, all thanks to the efforts of her mother, who was always overly caring. So she explained that she had only seen them in books, knowing what they looked like and what they were like, because her brother had described each creature in detail. Aiden noticed that his brother never told him about the monsters, as if he was deliberately hiding dangerous details so as not to worry him. Then, Irina suggested that he could just ask his brother directly, since she often questioned him, and Aiden became interested in what he would answer if he asked a question. Irina confidently said that her brother would definitely answer, adding that she found it very sweet when he shared his knowledge about such things. She also mentioned that she heard that her brother brought Aiden here to give him a better understanding of the world and what he might encounter. Irina stressed that she supported this decision, believing that he did it out of concern for his brother, wanting to protect and prepare him. Aiden looked down and quietly acknowledged that it was indeed true, agreeing that his brother's concern was genuine and thoughtful. After that, he turned around, announcing that he would go to his room, as if the desire to leave hid his true feelings. He ran sharply and suddenly, as if he wanted to get away from everything, not giving the opportunity to explain anything. Irina didn't understand why he was behaving so strangely. Her surprise was mixed with slight concern about his condition. She became curious about the hidden meaning of his actions. What secret motives were driving him at this moment? She decided to just go inside the estate without delay, taking her flowers with her to distract herself a little from her disturbing thoughts. Her mother would certainly be delighted if she gave her these flowers, because it always brought joy and warmed their communication. She contacted the city hall, trying to find out where her mother was, hoping for some clue or information about her location. Mary remarked that her ladyship was probably in the drawing room, and added admiringly that the hydrangeas looked truly lovely, like a living picture. She thought to herself that her mother must be busy with her own affairs again, carefully tending the plants, as was usually the case when she was completely immersed in household chores. Irina carefully approached the door and knocked quietly, and when her mother opened it, her face lit up with joy, seeing her daughter, who now stood before her, as if returning from the distant past. But Irina's gaze immediately noticed that her mother was not alone in the room, and a slight alarm flared up in her heart, because the presence of someone else here was unexpected and strange. She saw that her mother was sitting at the table with the Duke, whose presence here was as unexpected as it was strange, and this made Irina momentarily lost in conjecture. Mother was also surprised when she saw her daughter. Her eyes filled with warm amazement, because she did not expect to see Irina at such a moment, especially surrounded by guests. The Duke looked visibly embarrassed when he met Irina's gaze. There was a slight awkwardness in his demeanor, as if he had suddenly realized that he had found himself in a situation he had not expected. Irina didn't understand at all what exactly Ciel was doing with her mother, and this misunderstanding created a strange tension, forcing her to gather herself internally and watch every movement. The Duke sipped his tea casually, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room, and his calm contrasted with Irina's inner thoughts, which were raging as she tried to understand the situation. He said that the tea had a very pleasant aroma, and these words sounded natural, but there was a slight attempt to relieve tension or make an impression in them. The Baroness explained that she was grateful because she had prepared this tea herself, having dried various herbs, and was glad to learn that its taste was to the Duke's liking, giving the meeting a slight warmth. She thought the Duke must already know that their family could not afford high-quality black tea, and this homemade alternative could replace the missing chic. The Duke remarked that he was simply impressed by the Baroness's modesty, and the lady accepted his kind words with gratitude, realizing that they carried not only a compliment, but also respect for her work. At the same time, they were both aware that they were living a different life from that of the nobility, and this understanding made their communication more subtle and imbued with hidden significance. The Baroness also noted that the gentleman had spoken of a desire to discuss something important with her, and this hinted that a conversation was forthcoming that could change the atmosphere of the meeting or shed light on hidden circumstances. She prepared for this conversation, simultaneously watching the Duke and feeling a slight anxiety, because his every movement and word now had a special meaning, and Irina tried to predict the outcome. The atmosphere in the room was at once calm and tense. Tea, conversation, and glances intertwined to create a complex web of emotions in which each participant teetered on the edge of surprise and caution. He came with the intention of discussing with her an important matter that had long occupied his thoughts, hoping for her understanding and support. He explained that he had come in search of her help, counting on her participation and goodwill in the current situation. From under his cloak, he pulled out a bag, which apparently contained money, neatly folded and ready to be handed over. He admitted that he still wanted to do something significant in the cloche domain, and it seemed to him that her favor would allow him and his brother to stay here longer. Irina cautiously inquired about what exactly was in the bag, trying to understand the guest's intentions and the nature of his offer. The Duke explained that the bag contained 50 gold coins, and that this amount should cover the expenses associated with the stay. He noted that the Baroness was looking at him with surprise and some menace, as if she did not approve of his actions. He didn't understand why her gaze seemed so stern, because in his experience, such situations usually did not cause irritation. Perhaps she considered his behavior to be wrong, since in other regions, he rarely had to stay in the estates of other families. Usually, when visiting foreign lands where there were no houses of his family, he left a small fee for a few days' stay. This money had no other meaning. The Baroness said they regretted the circumstances and could only accommodate him for a short period due to financial difficulties. However, their intention was not at all to offend the guest or restrict his freedom here, She looked at him sternly and at the same time with some concern, assessing his reaction and behavior. The Duke said that he only wanted to free her from unnecessary worries and not disturb her with his visit, wishing to make her time easier. He began to feel uneasy, feeling that a serious misunderstanding had arisen that needed to be resolved immediately. It was important for him to clarify the situation in order to avoid possible resentment and misunderstandings between them. At that moment, Irina suddenly entered the room, as if appearing out of nowhere and disrupting the usual order. The Duke was embarrassed at the sight of her, not expecting to meet her here, and this moment made him hesitate and become confused. He felt very embarrassed and suddenly blushed, as if his entire inner world had spilled out, showing all his vulnerability in front of her. In front of him was his dear one, the one for whom he worried every day, and the joy of meeting literally shone in his eyes. Mother invited her to sit down next to her, showing concern and respect, because it would have been extremely strange if she had simply gotten up and left. Irina wondered where her father was, and her mother looked irritated, which gave the atmosphere a slight tension and hidden anxiety. Bar Onessa said that he could stay here as long as he wanted, as if opening the door to their world without limits. But in reality, her goal was simple. She wanted him to take the money, as if completing this quiet ritual of care and help. She simply called them a bag, and Irina had no idea what was inside, leaving room for slight bewilderment and intrigue. Apparently, her mother gave it to Ciel, and he paid to delay her departure, acting quietly but decisively, as if thinking through every step. He noted that when he gave the money, he did not want to offend anyone. Irina understood that his gesture was dictated by gratitude, although it reminded them of the price of their suffering. Undoubtedly, their way of life was more like that of ordinary people, rather than nobles, deprived of excesses and usual luxury. Nevertheless, they remained noblemen, with an inherent pride and sense of self-worth that could not be erased by time or circumstances. After these words, he looked at Irina, and his gaze, full of excitement and inner tension, said more than 1,000 words. Irina couldn't understand why he was looking at her like that, as if there was a secret hidden in his eyes that she hadn't yet solved. There was something in his gaze that suggested a need for help, as if he needed support and understanding as much as she did. Irina had never seen her gentle and kind mother show such sharp hostility towards someone, as if that person was the source of all her worries. This unusual behavior of her mother towards another person greatly surprised Irina, because she was used to seeing only care and affection in her. Irina decided not to interfere and not to help him in anything, realizing that support now would only worsen the tension between them. He himself brought it to the point that Irina's mother was angered by his behavior and words, and she was not going to turn a blind eye to it. She gently took her mother's hand, feeling an inner determination to act as her heart told her, despite the tension of the moment. Irina looked at her mother and gave her a slight smile, as if trying to lighten the mood and show that she was nearby. Mother responded with a smile, and this brief moment of mutual understanding eased the tension between them a little. The Duke was left confused, not understanding how to properly respond to such a display of warm feelings and hidden hostility at the same time. He again pretended to need someone's support, hiding his true motives and trying to appear harmless. He stated that they should know the timing of the last waves of monsters' attacks, and that he had already burned down some of the territory in the nearby mountains to prevent the threat. But before the consequences became obvious, he managed to set fire to part of the sofa in his room, adding to the chaos and confusion. Mother asked him again, and Irina remembered that she had heard how her mother had once brought him from her home when she got married, and she wondered about the reasons for mentioning him. She didn't understand why he had introduced details into the conversation that could now only worsen his situation and arouse unnecessary suspicions. However, these actions only confirmed to Irina that today he was definitely going to leave, despite all the persuasions and circumstances. He explained that he only wanted to compensate for the mistakes made, emphasizing that the coins were not for the kindness shown, but for the damage caused to the mountains and the sofa. He assured that he sincerely regretted it, and added that sometimes people unwittingly make mistakes, especially when they cannot fully control their abilities. He noted that similar incidents could recur during his stay here, and therefore he seeks mutual understanding and the prevention of further conflicts. The Duke emphasized that if other nobles learned of his esper abilities, such mistakes could result in many serious problems for him. He tried to explain that this was why it was important that his abilities and incidents remained under control, and that his relationships with others were built carefully. He lied without hesitation, and no one could doubt his abilities, because he was a duke and the only esper in the entire empire, not counting his younger brother. Irina noticed that her mother was reacting to what was happening in an unusual way, as if something had deeply affected or surprised her. She saw her mother suddenly blush and cover her mouth with her hand, trying to hide her embarrassment and inner excitement. Mother seemed unable to believe that even the espers, whom she considered almost infallible, were capable of making mistakes. Most people shared the Baron's opinion, believing that mistakes were unacceptable. But Irina understood. Espers remain people, and this is natural. Espers were doomed to make mistakes because their emotions were inevitable, and deep down, Mother agreed with this, although she was surprised. Or perhaps, Mother simply could not accept the idea that people she considered great were in fact subject to weaknesses and feelings. Now he seemed almost the same as ordinary people with their sufferings and joys, which can and should be felt with all your heart. Thanks to her past life memories and knowledge of the original story, Irina always understood the side effects of esper powers, which is not the case with her mother. This suggested that most of the inhabitants of this world were not at all aware of the intricacies and problems associated with the powers of espers. The Duke noted that such information was secret and known only to the esper himself and members of the imperial family, who guarded it carefully. But, given the kindness shown, he did not object to sharing this information with Irina and Lady Irina, showing trust. Irina believed that the Duke was doing this on purpose, testing her reaction and carefully revealing knowledge about the world of espers. The Baroness admitted that perhaps intervening in this was not the best decision, since the consequences could have been unpredictable. However, the gentleman reminded that espers need conductors, without which their abilities lose their meaning, and they become practically defective. Once an esper awakens his abilities, his life without a guide turns into a painful ordeal, like walking on hot sand without water, where every attempt to move brings searing pain. Wandering through these hot sands, he feels torment that seems to intensify with every second, when there is not a drop of saving coolness around, and the suffering becomes almost physical. The thirst that an esper feels cannot be banished on its own. There are only two paths. One leads to death, the other to a meeting with someone who can become his guide. He is faced with a choice: either end his own life or find a guide whose support will allow him to overcome the painful emptiness and find peace and meaning. The Duke noted that it seemed their meeting had already taken place, although the defense side did not understand what exactly he was talking about, as if the words were losing their meaning in the tense silence. He confirmed that he had indeed met his guide, that special one who could share his abilities and fill his life with new meaning, changing it forever. He expressed curiosity, wanting to know if she was interested in who exactly had become his guide, as if anticipating her reaction and the connection that could unite their destinies. Irina realized the truth. His guide was Ciel So-hyun, and this realization turned her inner world upside down, connecting the past and the present, life and reincarnation. The question arises, what if he tells her mother about her nature as a guide, revealing secrets that could change the entire family balance? But Mother, with her inherent wisdom, said that first of all, one must look at the passage of time and understand when exactly it is best to act in order to maintain harmony. She apologizes sincerely for the rush, explaining that it is time for her to go, leaving behind a feeling of slight sadness and an understanding of the inevitability of separation. Even though the conversation was fascinating and informative, it is necessary to start preparing dinner so that no one in the family goes hungry, maintaining order and caring for loved ones. The Duke agreed with her words and admitted that she was right. He also rose to leave, showing respect for her position and readiness to follow the established order. She was left alone with them, and Mother was amazed by what she saw, experiencing mixed feelings of surprise and admiration at how events were unfolding before her eyes. In his family, not a single man could boast of such observation and depth of understanding, which made this situation especially unusual and significant for everyone present. The Baroness was genuinely grateful as she saw him off, feeling the warmth and respect that permeated her every gesture and look, emphasizing the significance of the moment. Meanwhile, she remained in her mother's office, watching what was happening, immersed in thoughts about the future and the meaning of the events that had just happened. She decided to stand up and say goodbye to him, feeling the need to close this stage of the meeting with the respect and grace that was characteristic of her character. Coming closer, she gently made it clear that she was ready to leave, leaving space for farewell and a final parting that brings peace. By simply walking past him, she maintained her dignity and inner strength, allowing the moment to end naturally, without unnecessary words and emotions that could complicate everything. But suddenly, he turned his attention to her, as if everything else around him ceased to exist, and his gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. He expressed a desire to speak to her before dinner, as if these words contained an importance that could not be postponed until later. He carefully asked if she would mind their meeting, trying not to invade her personal space prematurely. He clarified that he wanted to ask just one question, nothing more, and there was a sense of sincerity and restraint in this intention. She agreed, suggesting a walk in the garden, where the air and greenery created a light atmosphere for a calm conversation. He began by apologizing for his behavior the night before, feeling awkward and wanting to correct his past mistakes, at least with words. She replied that she did not forgive him completely, but was ready to forget this incident and asked him not to enter her room without permission again. He nodded, showing understanding, and there was deep regret in his gaze, as if an inner voice demanded atonement. He hesitated, sighing, and for a moment there was silence between them, filled with anticipation of the essence of the matter being revealed. He began to speak, remembering that they had been in the imperial palace for a long time, where the tension and heat made the days difficult. This heat seemed to awaken a hidden energy that accompanied their stay and intensified the sensations of every moment. Consequently, as a guide, she had only recently awakened, and this circumstance only increased his confusion and surprise. He admitted that he was confused, and there was a note of bewilderment in his voice as to how everything was happening so quickly and unpredictably. He explained that he did not understand how a novice guide could control his aura so masterfully, as if experience came instantly. He added that she doesn't realize it yet, but the conductor quickly shows her abilities and does it almost involuntarily. He noted that even a novice conductor involuntarily starts the stabilization process, which remains a mystery to him. He explained that it only took the touch of an esper for the stabilization process to begin, and it felt surprisingly natural. After he touched Irina de Cloche, she felt her aura respond, filling the space with warmth. He felt an internal stabilization again, and a quiet pleasure in her presence overcame him. He tried to explain his feelings, as if he knew everything himself, but the words came out awkwardly, and he only tried to convey that what was happening was clear and important to him. At that moment, Irina realized that he had revealed his feelings, and she realized that her actions could no longer be hidden. The secret began to gradually reveal itself. She tried to understand the meaning of what he said, watching him, and tried to catch what exactly he wanted to say, but the words remained incomprehensible to her. His embarrassment became noticeable. His hand turned slightly red, and the tension in his movements betrayed an inner excitement that was difficult to hide even in front of a newcomer. It was especially strange to watch how, next to the esper, the newbie guide, aware of what was happening, calmly carried out contactless stabilization as if it were natural. Irina did not allow the slightest misfire in energy management, not a single hint of loss of control, demonstrating confidence and precision in every movement. Even in the confined space of the living room, she remained completely calm and in control, as if the space around her was subject to her internal rhythm. Next to her, directly opposite, sat a Class S esper, watching her every action with attention and slight interest, assessing the skills of the guide. It seemed as if the entire process had waited for one of them to fully utilize their abilities, testing the limits and possibilities of interaction with the aura. She wanted to hear his comments, to understand how he perceived what was happening and what he thought about her actions, about how she controlled the energy. What Ciel said meant that he had found out her true nature and was now waiting for her to confess, knowing that the secret had already been revealed. Irina did not understand at all why he was behaving this way. Her thoughts wandered between guesses and surprise, not finding an answer to his sudden attention. He himself did not understand the reason for his behavior, as if a sudden desire to be close to her and the desire to touch her had taken hold of him without any logic. He had never shown such tension before, but now his actions and emotions seemed unusual, as if his inner state had changed in an instant. Therefore, Irina admitted her confusion, not understanding his words and actions, wondering why he was suddenly behaving so strangely. However, she did not allow him to completely control the situation. Irina de Cloche's determination was so strong that she decided to leave him right then and there, without waiting a minute. After that, she began to retreat, as if moving away from her usual comfort zone, and he could not understand why her behavior changed so abruptly, leaving him at a loss. He found himself completely at a loss, and did not know what to say to comment on her actions. He felt as if he had no control over what was happening. His gaze dropped downwards, and the realization that all was lost washed over him completely, leaving a chill of helplessness and anxiety in his heart. It seemed almost a curse. Knowing all the peculiarities of your wife was both a gift and a punishment, a double-edged sword that was difficult to cope with without fear and doubt. For example, he could assess how irritated or angry she was now, see the smallest emotions, but this only increased his internal tension. He clearly understood who she really was, but he couldn't comprehend why So-hyun, his wife in his previous life, decided to be frank with him now. Irina de Cloche always looked at him as if he was the only person in the world that truly worried her, which made any coldness unbearable. Therefore, complete indifference or lack of interest on the part of his wife left him stupefied, making him feel lost and unable to understand her motives. He was ready to do anything for her, if only she would gather up the courage and admit that she was his wife, and this confession could change their fate forever. At the imperial palace, the crown prince wondered where the duke had disappeared to again. His absence aroused curiosity and slight concern among the courtiers. Duke Leopard set out on a journey with his younger brother through the surrounding regions, currently in the Cloche family's domain, exploring new lands. The crown prince could not understand what could attract the duke to such a remote and little-known corner, and this caused him slight bewilderment. The servant informed him that he did not know the exact purpose of the visit, leaving the prince slightly confused and pushing him to take further action. He immediately decided to send a servant to find out the details of the visit, in order to find out the duke's true intentions and understand his actions. The gentleman assured that everything was fine. He did not expect that the reason would become known before he himself could voice it, and this calmed the situation a little. He thought about the fact that the last time they saw each other was at the coming-of-age ceremony, and more than a month had passed since then, and thoughts about the past time worried him. Seal, his friend, and someone he respected, even when he was the crown prince, always stopped by the secondary residence and took the time to have a quiet conversation with him. The fact that the duke left his possessions at the most critical moment, when the saint appeared, caused everyone to be quietly perplexed and alarmed. No one had ever experienced such happiness as he did when the temple predicted the coming of the saint, so his sudden disappearance seemed strange. He was very curious about what the duke was thinking, especially after everyone reported the sudden appearance of the saint in the temple. The crown prince was bored as he listened to what was happening, his thoughts wandering as his attention was drawn to the unknown, tense atmosphere around him. He immediately stood up and was surprised to see that the saint was also there, as if fate itself had brought her to this moment. He asked that they simply let her in first, without creating unnecessary haste, allowing the sacred event to develop naturally. After these words, the doors slowly opened and So-hyun stepped inside, her presence filling the room with a quiet light and calm. The prince could not take his eyes off the saint. His attention was completely focused on her, as if the world around him ceased to exist. He was genuinely glad to see her here. His heart slightly quickened its rhythm, and his thoughts were filled with quiet joy and excitement. The saint responded with gratitude, her words quiet but sincere, demonstrating mutual respect and a feeling of deep agreement. The duke asked the butler to bring them tea and desserts, making sure that the atmosphere was pleasant and calm for the saint. He reminded that everything must be at the highest level, so that the saint could truly enjoy the moment and feel respect for herself. Coming closer, he asked the saint to follow him, gently inviting her to walk through the hall, maintaining grace and politeness in every movement. He extended his hand, and she was pleased to accept this invitation. The warmth of his gesture warmed her, causing a slight tremor from attention and care. The saint was grateful, extended her hand in response, feeling calm and confident next to him, trusting his every movement. Being accompanied by such a handsome and polite man was always exciting. Every moment with him filled her inner world with quiet joy. In Korea, Irina Decloche only occupied the position of class conductor, but she was treated as if she had the power of S-class, which always slightly surprised those around her. Here she did not intend to resist completely, accepting the new circumstances and adapting to the situation without unnecessary stress. She reacted cautiously to such a sudden visit, but she knew that there were issues that needed to be discussed with the Duke immediately, without delay. He believed that someone might be making her uncomfortable or forcing her to do something she didn't want, which made him feel a little uneasy. Irina admitted that there is something that worries her, not hiding the excitement in her voice and gestures. Her concern was related to His Highness the Crown Prince, which she decided to communicate directly and without hints. He was shocked to hear this, and even a little embarrassed, not expecting that such concern could come from her. When pressed for details, he admitted that he would never have thought that he could be the cause of her worries and concerns. Irina smiled slightly and explained that she came precisely because she had been worried about him for the past few weeks, watching as she stabilized his condition. He asked if he meant removing impure energy, and she agreed, adding that that was what it was called at home, but she wasn't sure of the terms here. Now that she mentioned it, his curiosity was piqued, and he decided to study the records to understand the stabilization process in more detail. Irina noted that this was wonderful, and he would have to inform her of everything he learned. She was ready to cooperate, and he did not object. After these words, she calmly continued drinking tea, demonstrating her ability to remain calm and focused. His face flushed and grew hot as he realized how closely and seriously she took her duties. Suddenly, Irina turned her attention to the Crown Prince, looking at him with a light but confident determination. She looked at him carefully and began to carefully remove her gloves, demonstrating her preparation for actions that required close contact. She suggested stabilization immediately, hinting at the possibility of immediate intervention if he was ready for it. He felt very embarrassed. His face immediately turned red, as if a warm tide had caught him by surprise. His inner tension became noticeable. His body trembled slightly from unexpected excitement. He carefully asked if she meant doing it right now, trying to gauge how determined and ready she was to take action. She gently asked him to extend his hand, as if inviting him to trust her and allow her to begin the stabilization process, slowly and with full concentration. Here, on the spot, she began to stabilize him, carefully directing the energy and focusing on every small reaction of his body and aura. She put her entire aura into the process to achieve the highest quality stabilization, enhancing the flow of energy and harmonizing his internal state. It was incredibly pleasant for him to feel how the cleansing from impure energy was taking place. Every touch and every movement of her aura gave lightness and calmness. Eventually, the process was complete, and they felt a moment of peace as the energy regained its balance and the tension disappeared completely. He sighed softly in pleasure, feeling the tension and fatigue slowly dissolve, leaving behind a soft warmth and satisfaction. It was a strange feeling, as if all his previous needs and desires had disappeared, leaving only emptiness and an unusual peace inside. At the same time, there was a feeling of thirst for more, an inner desire to receive even more energy and contact, as if he had remained unfinished from this experience. Sveta simply continued to watch him, studying every movement, every nuance of his emotions and reactions, silently analyzing the process. She thought that perhaps this was no longer bringing the same pleasure as it once had, and this knowledge was reflected in her calm but attentive posture. He asked how she knew this, trying to understand how she could anticipate reactions that he himself was only just beginning to understand. She explained that this was a completely expected reaction, because stabilizing completely, using only the hand, is quite difficult and requires additional effort. He asked again if one hand was really not enough, and she confirmed it, after which he asked what was meant by proper stabilization. He didn't have a full understanding of the process, but he responded instinctively, trusting her experience and his inner feelings, following her movements. She stood up and announced that the next step would be something completely different, requiring closeness and greater concentration of energy. She came closer, took his hand, carefully directing the flow of energy and creating a feeling of confidence and complete trust between them. She sat on his lap, her gaze directed straight into his eyes, transmitting through contact the full depth of stabilization and control of energy. She moved closer to his lips, and he felt a strong excitement, as if the whole world had narrowed to their closeness and every movement that occurred at that moment. She began to kiss him, and through this contact, the energy of stabilization increased many times over, penetrating deep inside and harmonizing all internal flows. At that moment, he felt an incredible, almost wildly powerful stabilization, when every touch and movement of her aura completely filled him. Never before had he experienced such an unusual but warm joy that seemed to envelop everything around, making every moment unusually pleasant. Until that moment, he had never felt anything like this, as if his heart had responded for the first time to a quiet and soft touch of happiness that filled the space around him. The saint couldn't hide a slight smile when her gaze met his face, reflecting a mixture of surprise and quiet delight, which made her smile for no reason. She mentally expressed a desire to know where the second esper was, feeling that this search could change many things and open up new possibilities for the events to come. The Duke was meant. She knew there were only 2 espers in the Empire, and the man standing next to her at the last banquet was most likely the one she was looking for. She wondered why no one had come to her for stabilization yet, because she felt that it could significantly ease the situation and provide new answers. The Crown Prince informed her that he was currently busy with reconnaissance, and his return was delayed, leaving her in a state of slight anticipation and curiosity. She mentally imagined how she would like to spend time with 2 handsome men at the same time, feeling both curiosity and a little excitement at the possibility of playing with fate. He probably didn't yet realize how amazing the stabilization was, and this uncertainty awakened in her a feeling of slight mischievous joy and inner anticipation. She admitted to herself that she had hoped for a chance to introduce herself properly, but now she realized that she probably wouldn't see him this time, and that was a little disappointing, but it didn't ruin her mood. He noted that they should not keep her waiting and decided to send a letter to warn him that the return could be delayed, maintaining balance and order. He rang the bell to summon the butler, preparing for the next step and ensuring that everything happened precisely and without unnecessary haste. He asked the butler to give the Duke a letter so that he could return immediately, since the matter required his presence and decisive action. Saint Alicia smiled with a sly smile, as if she knew something that would surprise anyone who tried to understand her thoughts and intentions. She expressed her gratitude for his attention by touching him again with a light kiss, demonstrating respect and hidden playfulness. After some time, he accompanied the saint to her carriage, watching her figure smoothly disappear behind the windows of the carriage. He helped her gently inside and felt a quiet joy from the opportunity to be near her, even if only for a short moment. He cautiously asked her if she would have the opportunity to meet the former when she visited a certain place tomorrow, where their paths might cross. The Crown Prince said that it was so, and promised that he would make the one who was forcing the saint to wait, protecting her interests, pay. She thought that the punishment would most likely not be severe, since there was clearly a trusting and warm relationship between them, which softened the conflict. She tried to find out the identity of the one who was involved, and he revealed that it was Duke Ciel, revealing an unexpected turn of events. The Crown Prince, however, could not understand why he felt a sense of disappointment, since all she had done was simply call out someone else's name. The only thing he really wanted was to hear her voice. Its refined and calm tone was more important to him than any words. After that, he gently kissed her hand, and she felt a little embarrassed, not accustomed to such closeness and attention from a man. He simply responded with a smile, without words, leaving a light warmth and quiet joy in her heart from this moment. After a brief farewell, she left with her daughter, and he watched as the carriage gradually moved away, leaving a feeling of slight sadness. Inside the carriage, she sighed with relief, She would have to return to the boring temple, although deep down she dreamed of staying in the imperial palace. By the way, she had already spent more than a month here, gradually getting used to the environment and new responsibilities, feeling mixed feelings. Before this, her mission was in Korea, where she worked as an assistant conductor, participating in matters requiring caution and precision. It seemed like a simple matter, just a B-class gate, but the espers fought with all their might, demonstrating skill and determination, making things tense. A horde of countless monsters rushed in, turning the old gates into chaos, as if the world itself had disappeared into the abyss, and everything around had plunged into pandemonium. Everyone tried to run, scattering in different directions, but fear and chaos paralyzed their movements, giving them no chance of salvation. Naturally, no one was able to leave. All attempts were in vain, and everyone felt how helplessness squeezed their chest, leaving no hope of escape. Soyeon was left without support, because she was only an assistant guide and had neither the strength nor the experience to resist the monstrous horde. When she, with the last of her strength, ran into a dead end, it seemed that there was no way out, and panic squeezed her heart with every moment. And suddenly, her phone, which was not supposed to work in all gates, rang unexpectedly, interrupting the lingering tension with a momentary note of surprise. She quickly unlocked the device, and its bright light instantly illuminated everything around her, as if driving away the darkness and showing every detail of the dead end. After this, the phone went dead, and when she woke up, there were people standing in front of her praying and greeting her, with tears in their eyes and gratitude in their voices. Thus began her new life here, in this world, where the past seemed distant, and the present reality required strength and courage. She took her phone out of her pocket, as if hoping to find in it at least a small clue that could guide her in this new world. Everything around her definitely started with this phone, and she was trying to figure out how to use it to get back, or at least figure out the situation. She had never seen this app before, but now, in this new reality, curiosity made her go into it to explore and understand. The game interface appeared on the screen, and there she was, as if the system knew more about her existence than she could understand. She didn't know how to react to this. Her heart was pounding, and her mind was trying to comprehend the strange connection between her past life and this new, unexpected world. Irina Decloche carefully studied the information about the guides and realized that the level of each one reflects their class and abilities, which means that her status and capabilities depend on this. She noticed that there were quests, but their meaning and rules were still a mystery to her, like an open book in an unfamiliar language, requiring careful study. The text stated that Irina should become the first guide, gathering experience and resources from others, and this would significantly improve her abilities, opening up new horizons. This thought made her think about the importance of her role and how seriously she should take her purpose in this world. She guessed that there were other guides around her, perhaps observing and evaluating her actions, so her mission was not limited to personal tasks. Irina suspected that completing this mission might be the key to returning to Korea, but she knew that the path there required a careful and cautious approach. However, she could not understand why exactly she had to complete these quests and how it was connected with her past life and current role as a guide. She was treated with special respect, almost like a princess, because she was the only guide in this place, which automatically gave her importance and responsibility. Irina wondered why she should look for other guides, and at the same time seemed to belittle her own importance, although her powers and experience were unique. In the end, she decided to simply turn off her phone to temporarily free herself from other people's expectations and focus on herself and her new life. At home, most likely, no one was looking for her, even if someone suspected that she was missing, so here she had the freedom to act without outside pressure. In this new world, she had the chance to enjoy the luxurious life she had previously only dreamed of, and now it was real, not imaginary. Now that she was here, Irina decided to make the most of the situation, fully immersing herself in the opportunities and privileges that the new world offered. The Baron noticed that he was annoyed at how quickly the Duke was parting with the estate, and this left him with a slight sadness, despite his outward respect for the Duke's decisions. He told the Duke that he would be glad to see him again when he could return, showing genuine respect and a desire to maintain contact. The guard continued to train day and night, preparing for new sparring sessions and demonstrating full readiness for any challenges that might arise upon the Duke's return. The Duke confirmed that he would definitely return, showing his responsibility and respect for those who were waiting for him back in the domain. The reason for his departure was the strict execution of the order of His Highness, which emphasized the duty to follow instructions, even if it required temporary separation. He could not obey the order because he was using an emergency communication system that provided instant contact in critical situations. The connections served as a method of communication for patrols in remote areas to call for reinforcements. Irene's brother said he would pray that next time he would be able to meet the Duke's knights. He also hoped that one day he could train at the Leopard household, learning the intricacies of the methods used by knights and espers and improving his skills. His interest in training methods was so great that he carefully observed every movement of his instructors and tried to understand the hidden nuances of their technique. He himself did not understand why he called him back, because the consequences could be unpredictable, and decisions made in haste often led to dangerous situations. He couldn't believe that they would have to part with his wife, remaining completely helpless, as if fate was playing a cruel joke on him. He began to wonder if there was a way to stay close without breaking the rules, while still maintaining at least a small hope for a future together. If he brought Lady Irene to the capital, she would be able to meet with the prince or saint, which would open up new opportunities for her education and influence. He thought that if the prince became interested in his wife, it could change their fate, even if Irina's participation in it was minimal. After these thoughts, he became angry that circumstances continued to put up obstacles, preventing him from acting at his own discretion. David noticed the change in mood and was surprised to see how quickly emotions could take hold of a man he considered reasonable. He said that if the situation became too tense, he should be let know so that he could intervene or change the plan of action. The Duke realized that he was too carried away by his thoughts and simply ignored David, concentrating on his own tasks. He claimed that things were different from what they seemed, and that his actions were not dictated by anger or weakness, but merely strategy. On the contrary, he was ready to make every effort to prepare her for the upcoming trials of the House of Lepart, if Lady Irina did not take the initiative in training. Everyone around was delighted to hear this, except for Irina, who remained calm, watching what was happening and assessing her capabilities. In this case, he had already begun to retreat, accepting good wishes from those around him, realizing that new trials lay ahead. Irina watched him go and wished him luck on his way, feeling a little sad. He nodded in response, promising that they would meet again, and his words sounded genuinely grateful. She had already begun to think that he would never get ready to leave, but suddenly she noticed how he got ready and headed towards the carriage, trying not to waste time. After this, they got into the carriage, and when she entered, the Duke again carefully assessed the situation, checking that everything was ready and safe for the journey. She understood that meeting her wife through the saint would be a dangerous step, given the woman's cruel treatment of Irina in her past life. Staying in the Cloche family's domain seemed to her the most sensible choice, safe and familiar, where no one threatened her peace in life. This decision seemed much better than going to the capital, where dangers would be at every step and no one could guarantee protection. He watched the passing landscape from the carriage window, trying to concentrate, but his thoughts kept returning to Irina, to her calm determination. A glance at Irina made him realize that parting with her no longer seemed helpless. They both knew the value of this moment and said goodbye with respect. After a while, they used another portal, which quickly transported them to the Imperial Palace. The feeling of travel was almost imperceptible. Upon arrival, the Jewish man was present, welcoming their return and slightly surprised at the speed of their movement, but at the same time expressing sincere joy for both. First, they returned to their domain, where Aiden felt a slight excitement from being back among familiar walls, and everything seemed both new and familiar. He said he was going to go to a separate building to put his affairs in order and prepare for the upcoming visit, mentally preparing himself for each step. He wished them a pleasant stay at the Imperial Palace, maintaining politeness and respect, understanding the importance of these formalities for future relations. Meanwhile, the gentleman turned to the butler, ordering him to start preparing for Aiden's arrival so that everything would be perfect and meet the high standards of the palace. The butler was instructed to immediately prepare a room for Aiden in the main mansion and ensure that all his belongings were moved without delay, which made him feel slightly nervous. Aiden was surprised to hear this, not expecting such attention, and his surprise was expressed in slight confusion. Everything was happening too quickly and on a large scale. He didn't understand what exactly his brother was talking about when he mentioned the road, and the questions remained unanswered as Ciel watched his reaction, trying to catch every detail. Aiden noted that he doesn't hear the thoughts of others very often, and this has always made him cautious, forcing him to filter information and trust only himself. Now he no longer had to hide in a separate house, which eased his condition and gave him a sense of freedom, allowing him to focus on business and responsibilities. The brother said confidently that everything was indeed fine, as if he wanted to dispel any doubts, and this confidence calmed those around him a little. He was here exclusively for him, ready to support him in everything and not leave him at the moment when it was especially important. Aiden suddenly burst into tears at his brother's words, and embarrassment washed over him, because such displays of emotion were rare and unusual. Suppressing his brother's emotions, he expressed enormous gratitude, as if every gesture and word he spoke was filled with genuine respect and warmth. The next day, the Duke arrived to meet His Highness, and at that moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense and excited, foreshadowing an important event. There was already a saint there, whose calm gaze and soft smile immediately created a feeling of comfort and anticipation of something significant. The violent principal rejoiced at the sight of the Duke. His face lit up with genuine joy, which was evident even in small, barely noticeable movements. Ciel decided to introduce himself first, doing so with respect and caution in order to set the right tone for further communication. The saint was genuinely glad when she saw him. Her joy was noticeable in every gesture and look, as if she had been expecting this meeting for a long time. She noticed that it was probably another esper in front of her, which surprised her a little, but at the same time made her interested in new possibilities of communication. It had been a long time since they had last met at the banquet, and memories of those moments filled the atmosphere with a slight hint of nostalgia. The Duke remained silent at first, as if considering how to express his thoughts and feelings, which made his image even more mysterious. But he soon noted that quite a lot of time had passed since that meeting, and this gave the conversation a touch of casual frankness. The saint sat down next to him on the sofa, and he said that she had long dreamed of meeting him, and she was interested in getting to know him better, since they had only briefly met at the coming-of-age ceremony. He had absolutely no idea why she was saying this, and he was trying to figure out the motives behind her words, which made him be on his guard. But she did not understand why he was so cold towards her, and this gave rise to a slight confusion in her, mixed with a desire to get closer. She believed that he, unlike His Highness, must be shy, and this made his manner of behavior more mysterious and attractive. He admitted that he could not deny it, accepting with a slight smile the fact of his hidden shyness and inner constraint. Today, Ciel would also be going as a blessed saint, and the anticipation of this event calmed him down a little, despite the internal tension. It was great, because he had already endured a lot of pain as an esper, and any signs of support and blessing were especially meaningful to him. However, he felt strange and did not understand where this feeling came from, as if new emotions and events were awakening unexpected feelings in him. The lady believed that he was experiencing great suffering. His eyes reflected coldness and fatigue, as if long torment had left an indelible mark on his soul. All espers are required to have a conduit that directs their power and supports them in moments of exhaustion, linking their energies into a single flow. She asked for congratulations to help them, and easily indicated that he should take her hand, as if it were a ritual connecting their powers. He had no choice but to submit to her will, and he felt a strange combination of tension and trust in her presence. She said she blessed him, her voice filled with soft authority, as if giving him protection and strength at the same time. After the words, she carefully touched him, slowly beginning to stabilize his internal energy, as if directing the flow of life in the right direction. She felt genuine joy watching the process, even if he remained distant. All espers must love the guide. She wondered how his cold face would change. She perceived what was happening correctly, feeling how her energy gradually flowed into him, giving part of herself to maintain balance. He himself did not understand what exactly was happening. His body felt an alien force that slowly penetrated every cell, causing strange confusion. His body barely absorbed any energy, and he didn't understand why. Perhaps it was because he had already received enough power from Irina in the past. It was incredibly difficult for the saint to perform this action. She felt a physical and spiritual strain that almost exhausted her. She was both tired and trying to hold on to the hereditary gift so that the energy would be transferred correctly despite the stress. The middle prince immediately rushed to the saint, grabbing her as if trying to support and protect her in a moment of extreme weakness. She began to feel very unwell, barely able to hold herself together, and made it clear that she was extremely ill from such a load. She had spent all her energy trying to help, and she didn't understand why the effect didn't work. Perhaps he was of a higher class than the crown prince. The prince insisted that a doctor and a priest be called immediately, realizing that the situation was critical and required the intervention of specialists. But the duke intervened and said that he would call for the necessary help himself, demonstrating confidence and control over the situation. He went out abruptly to find someone who could come to his aid, acting decisively, without delay, so as not to lose time. However, he simply ordered the servant to call the priest who was to bring the saint, completely trusting the servant to carry out the task. The duke himself continued to move along the corridor without stopping. His steps were confident and quick, as if he was solving important matters further. No one understood why the effect didn't work. Perhaps it was due to the energy he received from Irina earlier, which made his body more resistant to external influences. He felt a familiar feeling, as if this moment was a repetition of the light they had experienced before. He double-checked himself, thinking that he could not block another guide. The idea that he might still be connected to his wife seemed strangely intrusive to him. He tried to understand how that was possible after everything that had happened. The idea made him very uncomfortable. He felt a mixture of awkwardness and confusion, realizing how personal and deep this connection was. All of this was a form of contract between the esper and the conductor, who felt mutual affection, and as a result, they belonged to each other completely. In other words, their relationship resembled an ordinary marriage for people. Only for them, it was a more spiritual and energetic union, inaccessible to ordinary observers. For them, as for distant ones, a relationship of this level was considered a serious decision, almost a ritual step that determined the future fate of both. It was especially important that the esper chose correctly, because they could not receive outside help except from the one with whom the connection was established. Even on the brink of death, he remained connected to his Korean wife because this union was official and deep, tested by time and circumstances. However, since he went back in time, the connection could technically be considered severed because the events had not yet occurred in the new timeline. But if she still remembered him, then the moment of the past no longer mattered. Their relationship existed outside of time and space, supporting hope. The most important thing for him was that he was still connected to her, and this confirmed his theory. Irina was his wife, the same one who was with him in his past life. Now he felt a strong desire to see her, to get closer, to make sure that she was alive, and that their connection had not been destroyed by any circumstances. He turned to see the priest hurrying forward, another woman running beside him, their faces filled with worry and haste. But before he could act, he needed to speak with the high priest, who had the knowledge and influence to shed light on the situation. He was the only one who heard the voice of God and predicted the coming of the saint, so his words could be the key to understanding what was happening. Meeting him could reveal important details, provide a hint or confirmation that was so lacking for making decisions and strengthening hope. Meanwhile, the crown prince had already carried the saint into the room, carefully laying her on the bed, observing her condition and feeling worried about her health. He was very worried about her, feeling responsible and wanting to protect her, give her peace and security, even if his strength was limited. The prince tried to use his water energy to bring down the fever and ease the saint's condition, focusing on the precision and strength of his actions. Over time, Irina actually felt relief, as if the tension that had been pressing on her had finally begun to subside, leaving room for lightness and inner peace. A woman and a priest entered the room at the same time. Their presence brought a special, almost a feeling that the atmosphere around had changed slightly. The butler appeared with them, his steps quiet but confident, and the gentleman immediately inquired where the one he expected to see was now. He also wanted to know the whereabouts of the Duke, and the butler reported that he had apparently left the palace, leaving behind only the slight rustle of his footsteps. The butler added that, in his opinion, the Duke left at the very moment when Irina lost consciousness, and this coincidence could not go unnoticed. The Crown Prince knew well that the Duke had changed after his coming-of-age ceremony, but he still could not fully understand his attitude towards the saint and her role in this palace. He ordered the butler to ensure that no one spread rumors about this incident, since any talk could negatively affect the Duke's reputation. The prince inquired what the priests had said, and the butler reported that they still insisted that the saint return to them, despite her weak condition. The Crown Prince decided to write a letter and see that it was delivered, and the priests who appeared after the Duke's departure demanded that the saint be returned to the temple, seeing her weakened state. But as being explained to them that the palace would take care of her, since she had lost consciousness right here, and this place had now become her safe haven. However, the priests persisted in trying to take the saint away, despite the explanations, and the prince had to make a decision and drive them out in order to protect her and maintain order. He handed over the letter and asked the butler to deliver it to the head priest. He also handed over a letter, which he wanted delivered to Lord Leopard. The butler had to be especially careful with this letter. His word was law for the butler, and he immediately set out to carry out the task. Then the prince finally sighed with relief, looking at Irina. The baron was getting ready for a business trip. He said that this time he would be gone for about 2 weeks. He also asked David to keep an eye on the security and take care of his mother and sister. David noted that there was no need to worry. His father was already used to such trips, although this time he would be away longer than usual. He added that there was something that dear Irina wanted to try, and he was obliged to give it to her. Mother asked what they were talking about, and Irina explained that she wanted to try special ingredients that were supposedly found in Yuri's kingdom. Even earlier, she asked her father to establish trade with this kingdom, but he asked her to wait. He considered it impolite to leave while Duke Leopard was visiting them. It seems that the saint has not yet brought new dishes, so there is a chance, and Irina really hopes that her father will make it in time. My brother said he would take care of the house security. Mother wished him good luck and turned to Irina. She suggested that they go for a walk together. She also noted that she had long wanted to ask her something. She turned to her daughter, asking if she liked Duke Leopard. Irina was surprised. Mother said that she understood everything. Before, meetings and her thoughts attracted her attention, but Irina tried to object that she did not love him, and her mother noted that before meeting her father, she had not lived in the capital for long. Her late grandmother on the younger side also lived there. Irina hardly listened, so she didn't understand why they were telling her this. Mother added that for the first time in the capital, she accidentally ran into a gentleman. It might have been like meeting her father for the first time, although she thought they met in her hometown. Mother admitted that she naively believed that everyone in the capital behaved as politely as he did. It was probably then that she fell in love for the first time. It turns out that her father was not her mother's first love, and her grandmother died shortly after that. She had no choice but to return to her hometown, where she met Irina's father. She could not even imagine that he would turn out to be such a noble man. All this suggests that it doesn't matter to her who Irina marries, as long as it's for love. But she asked her dear daughter not to leave her alone. She took Irina's hand, a little upset. She still couldn't forget that incident. Suddenly, Irina hugged her mother and said that she wanted her to be happy. She added that they will always be together and promises this. Mother was happy to hear this, but Irina noted that she was mistaken. She doesn't understand why her mother thinks she's fallen in love with the Duke. Love is good. There is nothing to be ashamed of. But Irina continued, explaining that she seriously did not love him. Mother said that she wondered why Irina looked at the Duke so often, especially when he was not there. She looked thoughtfully at the doors, as if waiting for his return. Irina tried to do everything that brought joy, just to avoid encountering him, but she could not forget his words, because her mother always listened to her attentively. Now, Irina wasn't even sure if she had managed to completely forget her feelings for Ciel. She wished her mother a pleasant evening and went up to her room. Mother told her to have a good rest, and even though the temperature had already dropped, it was still necessary to take care of your health. The Duke had feelings for Irina, and Irina had feelings for him too. Mother noticed this from the very moment he arrived to them. Watching them, she would not say that it was love at first sight. Rather, their meeting seemed predetermined by fate. It was not that she did not like the Duke. He was quite handsome, but that a strong family could not rely solely on the decisions of the head. Advisors and relatives acting as a single entity would not accept Irina. In addition, a noble lady with an unfavorable past was already losing value. Mother would never have allowed her daughter to experience such humiliation. She walked up to the wall that had once been on fire. I clearly remember the moment when Irina woke up, and everyone thought that she was already dead. Her eyes no longer sparkled as they used to. She didn't look like herself at all. Goosebumps ran down her skin when her mother saw her doll-like, emotionless face. The fear of losing her daughter again was stronger, but she was still her daughter, even though there had been changes since then.